Good evening. I am Dr. Jaime Rodriguez, Vice President of the Weslaco ISD Board of Trustees. This board workshop is being conducted in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. The board is meeting by the use of Google Meets and telephone transmission, which allows two-way communication for members of the public during public comments. A recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. The time is now 5:32 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. I will now begin the roll call. We'll start with Mrs. Jackie Susaita.
Present.
Coach Jesse Trevino.
Present.
Mark de los Santos.
Present.
And let the record show that a quorum of board members are in attendance. A quorum is not required for board workshops. And we will go on to item 3, public comments.
There are none.
And now we'll go on to item 4, presentation by Weaver and Tidwell LLP on final forensic audit report. Dr. Valdez.
Vice President Dr. Rodriguez, trustees and members of the audience, Travis Kasner and his team from Weaver and Tidwell are joining us remotely to share their presentation of the WISD forensic audit final reports as requested by the Board of Trustees. Mr. Kasner, if you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you. And Jared Jordan, who's the partner in charge for Weaver's Forensics and Litigation Services practices on as well. So he's also going to be presenting with me this evening. But I'm going to start by sharing my screen and get that set up, and then we'll get started.
All right, thank you, Travis. I can see the slides now. Can everyone else?
Yeah, you're not seeing the one with the notes, right? It's the full slide right now.
No, it does show the next slide, and it
okay
on the right.
Let's
Very.
try it again.
That's it.
It's good. So right now it's showing the full slide.
Correct.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing us to present the findings of our investigative efforts on this matter. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes at the outset and refresh everyone's memory about Weaver and our experience with ISDs and the approach we took on this engagement. Weaver is the 35th largest accounting firm in the country. We have 12 locations across the United States, with 8 of those being in Texas, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth, among some other offices in smaller cities. We've got 800 plus employees and over 100 partners. And one of our core areas of focus is government-related work, both financial statement audits, internal control assessments, as well as forensic investigations such as this. Also wanted to take just a moment to highlight our experience serving school districts across Texas. We have worked on a number of different types of engagements, ranging from traditional financial statement audits to forensic investigations such as this, as well as other risk advisory services. This is a list of the different types, or the different school districts and other organizations that we have provided services for over the years. And again, this is just a sample list of those. So wanted to take a minute and just talk about our approach that we took on this investigation. It's an approach that we follow on just about any investigation that we perform, whether it's for another school district or a city or municipality, or for a privately held company or a large publicly traded one. You know, typically our phase one includes a planning and scoping exercise. Often that involves discussions with key stakeholders, as well as performing some preliminary analyses that we'll talk about a little bit earlier to identify areas for further investigation and analysis. Phase two of our efforts typically involve a deep dive or additional investigation of the areas that have been identified during phase one, as well as other areas that arise either that we believe should be investigated or key stakeholders ask us to expand our scope into during the course of the investigation. The last phase of our work in these types of matters is the documentation and reporting phase. That can take many different forms. In this case, we've submitted 2 reports, as well as the presentation this evening. And just again, to refresh everyone's memory, the background about how this project came about was that Weaver submitted our statement of qualifications in response to the district's RFQ that was produced. I believe it was on January 6th, 2021 is when we submitted our statement of qualifications. We were subsequently selected and then retained by the board in early February. And during that board meeting, we also conducted a board workshop and meeting with board members to discuss and establish the scope of our services in this matter, as well as to identify the potential areas for us to review during the course of our investigation.
And I'm going to talk about the scope of work next, and then get into the summary of our observations and findings. And just as Jared mentioned earlier, we've submitted 2 reports, and that really includes the detail of our findings. And this presentation is intended to be a summary of the work that we did and those findings and observations, and the exhibits and the appendices that support the report also provide a lot of the detail of how we arrived at our conclusions and ultimate findings, as well as recommendations. So this is summarizing the contents of those 2 reports. And one other thing I do want to mention is that the reason that there's 2 reports is that for timing purposes, we were asked by the board to, have certain, scopes of work presented first, so that there was time for decisions to be made, and to the extent they needed to be related to the school year starting in August. And so it's really all part of this same engagement and scope of work, but we did have 2 reports for logistical purposes. And to really go into the scope of work, as Jared mentioned, we met with the board in February of 2021 and had the initial discussions about the scope of work, and it's consistent with what we typically do for these types of investigations, where phase 1 is really understanding the issues, having the conversations and discussions with the key stakeholders, which in this case is the board, and understanding the areas where investigation is required. With many of these, there's cost considerations, and we can't investigate every single aspect of the district's operations. And so it's a combination of understanding what the priorities are, what concerns have been raised, what issues are already known or have been made aware to the stakeholders, and then also our approach then to do some analytics and look at a lot of the broad transactions and identify any additional areas of further review or where there's potential red flags. But really the goal is, from a financial standpoint, is to identify any potential fraud, waste, and abuse. And so that being said, the scope of work that we finalized, through working with the board was to review the financial expenditures for the district going back to fiscal year 2015 to identify any potential fraud, waste, and abuse. And so that's approximately $1 billion worth of expenditures for both salary, payroll, as well as payments to vendors, contractors, and third parties. One component of that is the construction, the spending on construction projects through a combination of bond and tax notes, as well as local funds from the general fund. Our scope also included a benchmarking analysis where we compared the district's expenditures compared to the other comparable school districts in Texas, and specifically, we'll talk more detail about this in a little bit, the school districts with over 10,000 students enrolled, which was about 112 school districts. We also conducted a review of payments of vendors, consultants, contractors, as well as other third parties that were paid by the district. And the objective was to identify any potential conflicts of interest or any potential improper payments. And then we also looked at certain assets over a certain dollar threshold, which we determined to be $5,000. And again, I think we decided it was not cost effective to do an inventory of every asset over 5,000, but we were, narrowed our scope to identify the priority items for what that review included. We also conducted a review of the district's processes and procedures, and this was, one component of this related to purchasing and procurement, including purchase orders, requisitions, the competitive bidding process, vendor management. We also one of the priorities for the board was to look at the district's hiring practices, including the internal or lateral transfers. We were also asked to look at the compensation plan as far as pay scales, and the annual pay increases included the practice for making those changes each year, and the methodology, et cetera. We also looked at the district's job descriptions, and both the current job descriptions as well as the archive of job descriptions to review the revisions for each position going back 5 years. We looked at the district's policies and procedures, both with respect to local and legal, as well as kind of the employee handbook and procedure manuals that were available. And then finally, we were asked to look at the district's organizational structure to determine if the alignment was appropriate for the district's strategy. So during the investigation, there was a large volume of information that we reviewed, including electronic and hard copy documents, as well as through the course of interviews that we conducted. But we looked at, for fiscal years 2015 through 2020, we looked at the board meeting minutes, the agenda packets, which were primarily located through the email. These were the detail for each of the agenda items that has provided to the board, with kind of the detail for in addition to what's on the district's website, as well as meeting videos, kind of where applicable, for where we needed to actually watch the videos of certain meetings. We analyzed over 2.3 million email records related to 27 current and former district employees. We also looked at purchasing records from the district's Alio Scan database, including invoices, purchase orders, requisitions, kind of all the supporting documentation that is maintained by the district for each vendor, that is scanned into the Alio system. We conducted witness interviews with over 30 current and former district employees, as well as board members and third parties. And we also analyzed the various district financial reports, including the check register, the audited financial statements, and the PEMS data that's submitted to the TEA. And I also want to point out too that these are some of the information and data that we reviewed and some of the work steps performed, but there were additional work steps that were done that formed the basis of our observations and findings and recommendations, and those are discussed in more detail throughout the two reports that we submitted. So now I'm going to start. This gets into the observations and findings, and I'm going to start with the report number 2 that we submitted in sequentially. This is the more of the financial related items, and I'm really just going to go in order of the executive summary, where first we're looking at the benchmarking analysis that we did for the fiscal years 2015 through 2019. To give a little bit of information about the methodology, as I mentioned, we looked at fiscal years 2015 through 2019 and looked at the 112 school districts in Texas with over 10,000 students. And the approach that we took and that we typically take with these types of investigations is to kind of look at the cost categories on a granular level. And so what I mean by that is if you're looking at, the financial statements and the broad cost categories such as, professional services or, instruction, they're too broad if the objective is to identify potential fraud, waste, and abuse. And so what we typically do is get the cost, narrow the cost categories to where we can identify anomalies and potential red flags. And so, to that end, what we typically do is create a matrix with the function and object codes, kind of where those two codes define the cost category. And so, for example, we can, focus in on, this is just an example, the function code 34, which relates to student transportation, and then object code 6249, which is contracted maintenance repairs. And so identifying all of the transactions for the district that are coded to those two codes, and then comparing to other school districts, and also normalizing on a per student basis. And so that allows us to kind of do an apples to apples comparison of the district to the 112 other school districts, and identify areas where spending is higher or lower, or very comparable to the other school districts. And the goal of doing this is to identify some of the higher risk cost categories where there may be potential fraud, waste, and abuse, or where maybe it's more likely. And so this would include, as I mentioned, cost categories where the spending may exceed comparable school districts. One of the common metrics we use is the top 5 or top 10%. So there's 112 comparable school districts, and the district's ranked, 5th or 6th out of 112. That would be one where, we might want to look further about what are the costs, where are the payments going to for that cost category. And then cost categories where there's discretionary spending. And so by discretionary spending, I mean some of the ones where it's payments to vendors, or miscellaneous operating costs, less so the salaries and the payroll related, but more of the ones where it's a little bit less clear about where the funds are being used based on the name and the code of the cost category. And so these are some examples of some of the cost categories that we identified from our review as being higher risk of potential fraud, waste, and abuse from the benchmarking analysis. We did, one of the appendices in our report has the complete analysis, but this was kind of for summarizing. These are some of the ones that we highlighted in the executive summary. What you'll see is most of these are, where the cost categories where the district's ranked in the top 10. So if we're looking at the first one, professional services related to curriculum and staff development, and that was one where the district ranked 8th out of 81. And the reason it's 8 out of 81, we're still comparing to the 112 other school districts, but not all of the school districts use every cost code. And so in this case, this would be, I guess, indicative of 29 or 31, I guess, school districts didn't report for that cost code, but we're still comparing to the same, 112 other school districts. And so what you'll see is a lot of these are ones where kind of based on the district's spending levels compared to other school districts, as well as our experience conducting these types of investigations and the types of cost categories where we do find there's higher risk of fraud, waste, and abuse. Examples being contracted maintenance or miscellaneous operating costs or miscellaneous contract services. These were some of the cost categories that we identified from the benchmarking that were, for further review. Switching next to awards and incentives, this was a cost category that we conducted further investigation of, and I'm gonna actually just back up real quick. So the awards and incentives, the code utilized by the district is 6497. For the TEA and the PEMS data reporting, it gets converted to 6499. So you can see that there were two different categories that had miscellaneous operating costs for object code 6499. So this was one that was where the district's expenditures were higher. It was also one where there were board members who had received concerns or had concerns about spending regarding awards and incentives. And so this was an area that we, conducted further investigation and looked at some of the payments to vendors within this cost category. And what we found from our review for looking at the district's check register for object code 6497, which is what defines the awards and incentives, is that from fiscal years 2015 through 2020, the district's expenditures were $4.9 million for awards and incentives. We also compared the budgeted amounts to the actual amounts for awards and incentives, and this chart below shows that in most years, in fact, in every year from fiscal years 15 through 20, the actual expenditures exceeded the budget amounts, in the total being about 1.6 million. But in most years, it was about a 40 to 60%, I guess, over the budget. And so that was one observation that we had. As far as the procurement process, we determined that the district awarded what's called multiple award contracts, where they selected, they did a request for proposals and approved several vendors based on the evaluations of the proposals by both campus principals and members of the purchasing department. The vendor that was paid the most from this cost category was Embroidery Express. They were paid $2.2 million out of that $4.9 million, so about 46% of awards and incentives. In 2017, the board started to require that for purchases over $3,000, that for awards and incentives, that there must be at least 3 quotes obtained from the approved vendors. In our review, we went into the Alio scan database and for all of the awards and incentives purchases to see if there were quotes that were obtained. And so we determined that for $627,629 of this $4.9 million, that the there were purchases that exceeded the $3,000 threshold, but we did not see evidence that multiple quotes were obtained in the procurement process. So we investigated that further to determine, why, if there was some other factors going on. So there was a couple of things that we identified. One, a lot of the $627,000 related to holiday incentive funds, and our understanding is that these are funds that are budgeted usually in November and transferred into the campus budgets for to use for these holiday incentive purchases. And given the short time window from November until the start of the holiday break, that the what's typically happened based on the documents we reviewed and our discussions with individuals in the business office is that there's authorization to purchase, even if it's over $3,000 without, obtaining multiple quotes due to the timing constraints. And so that was one of the larger, accounted for a lot of the amounts where we didn't see multiple quotes. Shifting gears now to construction expenditures. This was another area that we were looking into, and this was the largest cost category, with the exception of payroll that for the district during the period of our review. The district's construction expenditures during this period totaled $33.5 million. The majority of which were paid from the district's construction fund, so they were not paid from tax notes, or there was also a energy conservation fund, which was used for a kind of a energy savings project with it's kind of a special QZAB loan is what it's called, but it is borrowed funds. But most of the funds that were used for construction were from the construction fund, and my understanding is those are transferred over from the general fund. They're not bond funds per se. And there were from what we reviewed for this $33.5 million, most of that amount is related to 18 construction projects, which were awarded to 12 contractors. And so we reviewed the procurement method and the contractor selection process for those 18 projects. We determined that all 18 of the projects used a competitive sealed proposal procurement method. On average, the district received 5 proposals per project based on the request for proposals that was solicited. In 17 of the 18 projects, the board delegated authority to administrative personnel to evaluate and rank proposals and then make a recommendation to the board. Typically, the evaluation committees consisted of between 5 and 7 members. Typically, these are members from the business office, purchasing, construction, maintenance, the relevant department, or in some cases the engineer or architect that's been hired for the project also sits on those evaluation committees. For 11 of the 17 where the evaluation committees were established, the lowest cost bidder was recommended to the board and approved by the board. For the 6 that the lowest cost bidder was not selected, the second lowest cost bidder was selected instead. And for all the projects that we looked at, there were indicator explanations for why the first lowest bidder was not selected. Either they did not meet their criteria for the proposal in their submission, or there was apparent differences in experience where the second lowest cost bidder was more experienced, and that was what the explanation was for why they were selected over the lowest cost. Our review of the district's expenditures, we also, one of the cost categories where we observed higher spending compared to its peers, as well as an area that there had been some concern was related to the maintenance and repair expenditures for student transportation. So this was an area where we conducted further review, investigation, and looked at the payments to vendors within this cost category, the supporting invoices and purchasing documents, and conducted interviews as needed. So the summary of our findings related to our review of the maintenance and repair for buses. We found that the district paid 61 vendors for a total of $1.3 million during fiscal years 2015 through 2020. The highest paid vendor was Mid-Valley Trailer, which we're referring to as MVTR. Within this cost category, they were paid $686,123, which was over 50% of the $1.3 million total. I think that the total payments to MVTR across all cost categories was around $900,000 for this period. We looked at the procurement method for the bus repair and maintenance, and we noted that similar to the awards and incentives, that the district utilized the multiple award contract where they submitted or solicited proposals and evaluated and selected, in this case, four vendors that were approved and had a threshold of $3,000 where starting in 2018, where if purchases exceeded $3,000, then multiple quotes were required. So we looked at and this is just looking at the MVTR after May of 2018, when the board started requiring the $3,000 threshold for multiple quotes. For the 22 MVTR purchase orders that did exceed that $3,000 threshold, we noted that only 2 of the 22 there were multiple quotes. And based on our discussions with individuals from the transportation department, what our understanding is that the especially with repairs and when it's engine related and diagnostics are required, as well as the disassembly, reassembly, and towing of the bus from one location to another to get multiple quotes. It was from what we were told, it wasn't practical and timely, and so that was the explanation for why they didn't get multiple quotes for these kind of repairs. So this is a chart that shows on a quarterly basis the payments by the district to MVTR for bus repairs. So what we observed was that around the middle of 2016, which was around the time that there was a new transportation director, that there was a increase in the payments on a quarterly basis to MVTR. So this, I don't know if you can see it, but there's the dashed line here is kind of that kind of the June or July 2016 time period. We did note that there were payments to MVTR prior to the transition from the prior transportation director to the new transportation director. But we did observe an increase in repair payments for repairs and maintenance to based on our review of documents and email data, as well as discussions with individuals from the transportation department and from the business office. We determined that there were several occasions where the transportation director was questioned about the increase in payments to MVTR, specifically by the transportation director's supervisor and leadership within the business office. The reasons that were provided these were provided to us, but also to in correspondence with those individuals of why the transportation director for using MVTR for the majority of the bus repairs. Those included, one was convenience. The vendor MVTR was located or is located across the street from the bus depot. They were faster as far as the turnaround time for completing repairs compared to some of the larger repair shops. They also, it was noted that their hourly rate was lower compared to the other pre-approved, or I guess, vendors that were part of the multiple award contract.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I have a question, sir. I noticed here on our report, the names are there, but on your presentation, you did not put any names. Did you redact the names from the PowerPoint or your presentation?
I wouldn't call it a redaction. I think what we typically do in these types of presentations when we're referring to current employees is refer to the position. I think that the report is I think that remains unchanged and the names are included. I think is our general practice, unless it's unduly confusing as far as who we're referring to, our typical practice is to refer to the positions and the titles versus names where we can.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
We also noted in our review that there was, I guess, one event where the transportation director advocated for MVTR to receive contract related to the parts purchases in addition to the repair and maintenance, even though MVTR, not being a supplier, was not able to, did not in their proposal include a discount. And so there was some back and forth about the including them in the recommendation for the award. I think ultimately the MVTR was not included in that contract award related to the parts and supplies. During the course of our investigation, we were provided information that an employee was offered football tickets from MVTR representative. We were also informed that it was common for the transportation director to go out to lunch with that same MVTR representative. Based on the documentation that we reviewed, we noted that the Form 1295 that was submitted by MVTR to the district, which was also filed with the Texas Ethics Commission, it did not list the names of interested parties. And based on our understanding with the rules, unless there's circumstances we're not aware of, that's typically something that we would expect to see for smaller non-public companies. Still talking about the maintenance and repairs for the buses. We noted that most of the vendor payments that went to MVTR related to repairs of the district's older bus fleet, specifically the 2002 to 2006 model buses. We noted that after the flood that impacted the district in June of 2018, that the older buses were utilized as the spare buses, and all the buses that were within 10 years and still, had insurance coverage were replaced, and there were 63 new buses purchased that became the main fleet. So all of the 2002 to 2006 buses, which there were 21 of them, became the spare fleet starting in June of 2018. And from that time until the end of our review period, we identified payments totaling $179,000 to MVTR that related to those 21 spare buses that I just referenced. We conducted an on-site review of the entire bus fleet, and specifically with respect to the spare buses, we recorded the mileage as of May 2021. We compared that mileage to the last recorded mileage of September 2018. So we noted that in total, the 21 spare buses had about 105,000 miles during that 2.5-year period from September 2018. We noted there were 5 buses that had less than 300 miles. I believe that 3 of those were special education buses, and all 5 of the ones that had less than 300 miles also had over $10,000 in repair costs through MVTR. So what we did was for each bus, we took all of the invoices and identified which bus they were assigned to and analyzed the types of repairs for each bus. And so in the report, there's an appendix that details the analysis of the repair costs on a bus by bus basis. We also looked at payments related to professional services for primarily this would be consulting type of services, and this was another area where we identified that the district's costs were for certain cost categories were higher than the comparable school districts. And this relates to object code 6219 for professional services. We identified total payments to 311 vendors. I think the total is around 19 million. And we kind of prioritized, based on the types of payments. There are some that are larger payments for benefits and those kinds of things. So we kind of focused on certain types of vendors within this group that where we conducted further reviews. So one of those was the payments for special education consulting services. So we reviewed five vendors that are shown in this table that were special education consultants within the professional services object code. We noted that the total payments, which were a little over 1.4 million, that 29% of those that there was not purchase orders, and it was kind of spread. It was really across all 5 of those. There was about 417,000 where we did not identify purchase orders within the LEO scan database. We also, another area that we looked at within professional services relates to the ambulance services. We reviewed payments to South Point EMS, which totaled $191,825. We noted, based on our review of the board minutes and the documents within ALIA scan for this vendor, that the vendor had previously was Guardian EMS, and that there was a buyout that happened in 2015 or 2016 time period where all of the contracts that were assigned to Guardian were transferred over to South Point EMS. And we identified a campaign contribution from the owner of South Point EMS that was made to the district's former athletic director in the amount of $300. And that was related to a campaign for a board seat with another school district. We also determined that approximately 90% of the district's payments to South Point EMS did not have a purchase order. We did note, though, that the board, there was clear authorization from the board within the board minutes that indicated that the board had, approved the purchases for this vendor related to the ambulance services, which were typically $400 per game, primarily football, but other athletic events as well. Another area that we looked at within the district's expenditures was to identify any what we refer to as affiliated vendors, what this means when we say affiliated vendors is we're trying to identify any vendors that are either directly or indirectly affiliated with either current or former board members, as well as any district employees. And so to do that, we compared information from the vendor master file with respect for the I think there's close to 6,000 vendors, which lists all of their address, phone number, type of information, and cross-reference that to both the employee roster for each of the 5 years that we reviewed, as well as for board members and close family members of the current and former board members, to identify if there's any matches as far as phone number or address, and those are what we refer to as, I guess, potentially affiliated vendors, because I think there are instances where there are other explanations for why phone numbers match, or obviously people move or change phone numbers, and so the first step is to kind of do the cross-reference and identify those matches, and then to conduct further review. And what we're looking for, the objective of this type of analysis is to identify if there are any conflicts of interest or improper payments. And so through doing the analysis that I just described with the vendor master file and the employee and board information, we identified 37 potentially affiliated vendors. However, only 6 of the 37 of those vendors received payments from the district within the period of our review. So, the vendor master file, is, there's vendors that may have been paid, within, several years or more prior to the period of our review, or were set up and never received payment. We didn't, analyze the ones that did not receive payments within the 2015 to 2020 time period, but we did do further review of the 6 and to determine, whether there was any improper payments. There was one that we identified where it did look like the phone number matched, but it was not a true affiliated vendor, and that one is documented in the report. But what we found was that of these 6, we did not identify that there were any evidence of improper payments or any conflict of interest. And this is the last category within the review of the district's expenditures. We looked across the entire check register at the payments to vendors with respect to purchase orders. So we were looking at payments to about 5,700 vendors. The total for the period of our review is $260 million. So based on the information that is in the check register, we identified payments totaling $58.4 million, which equals 22.4%, where there was not a purchase order associated with the payment. And these payments primarily included, larger payments for employee benefits, insurance, utilities, legal services were some of the main categories. And we did have discussions with the business office, and based on the information that we received, there were several reasons why purchase orders may not have been issued for these payments. One being the size of the payments would have automatically triggered the would have gone through the district's approval process. These were larger payments. There was clear authorization by the board that these vendors were approved for these services. And so it did not, generally speaking, it did not appear that the lack of a purchase order was necessarily a attempt to circumvent the district's purchasing, the internal controls and approval process that is triggered with a purchase order. We also identified payments that where the board authorized emergency purchases, and specifically as it relates to the 2018 time period after the flooding, there was a period where for repair and maintenance of vehicles and facilities, and to do so in a timely fashion, that the emergency purchases, meaning the department did not have to obtain purchase orders in order to expedite the purchasing process. So that was another factor that we identified related to our analysis of purchase orders. And it might be that we're kind of in the a little over the halfway mark, and we're switching now to the other report. Does it make sense to stop and see if anybody has any questions now? I can't see the room, but I can keep going, or if you want to stop for questions, just let me know what makes sense.
You want to just continue, and we'll say the discussion for the end? Okay, we have an item for discussion after the presentation, Travis. So we'll go ahead and keep going.
Okay.
Presentation.
And so, as I mentioned earlier, we had split up the scope of work to be the review of the district's expenditures, and then also the review of the practices and procedures, and the majority of which relates to the human resources function within the district. And so we're talking now about some of our observations and findings with respect to that review, and this is where a lot of the financial review, our analysis is based on documents from Alia Scan, where we have the invoices and purchase orders, as well as the check register and the vendor master file, and a lot of those types of records. Our investigation here was primarily based on the review of email data, as well as interviews. We were on site I believe it was in May, and spoke with I think most, if not all, of the individuals within the department, and we did speak with the former HR director as well. To summarize our findings first, as it relates to hiring practices, this was an area that we were asked to look at. First, in relation to the position of HR administrator / HR director, and some of this is kind of for the background, but in January of 2014, based on our review of the board minutes and the agenda items within the email data, we determined that the board tabled a motion to approve a candidate that was recommended for the HR administrator position, and instead of approving that candidate, there were about 10 months later, in November 2014, there was a different candidate that was, well, let me back up. The board tabled the motion for the HR administrator position in January of 2014, and then there was a new hiring process and job posting and round of interviews. So it's a different round of interviews here, but it was a different candidate that was approved by the board than the one that was recommended in January 2014. we noted that the candidate that was approved by the board in November 2014 for HR administrator had less qualifications and experience than most, if not all, of the candidates that were interviewed. Within 10 months or so of being HR administrator, the individual was promoted to the position of HR director. We noted that the HR administrator that was being promoted did not have a master's degree, which was a requirement for that position. We also noted that the 12 other candidates, 12 of the other candidates, I believe there were a few others. I think there was a total of 15 candidates. 12 of the other candidates did have master's degrees. And we noted that as of that promotion to HR director, that from September 2015 to November of 2014, within that 10-month period, that the HR director's salary had increased about 107% from $48,819 from the data analyst position to $101,278 for the HR director. We also, in our review of email data, we noted that the HR administrator that was promoted to HR director emailed the interview questions, or appeared to email. We haven't confirmed if these were the email questions that were actually asked. We did speak with members of the interviewing committee, and given that it was September 2015, 6 years ago, we do not know for certain, but what we do know is that the individual emailed questions to themselves the night before the interview for HR director that were appear to be the format of the interview questions for the HR director position. We also noted that the HR director had been an active volunteer in past election campaigns for several board members within the district, including one who was serving on the board when they were hired as HR administrator, as well as when they were promoted to HR director. During our review, we also noted that both the son and the daughter of the HR administrator and HR director were hired by the district in August of 2015. So this would have been kind of right prior to the promotion from HR administrator to HR director. The son was also in August of 2020 was transferred from a math teacher position at Mary Hogue Middle School to a health teacher position at B. Garza, and that we noted it was facilitated in part by the HR director. Just to provide a little bit more detail, what we determined in our review of the email data, that there was a music teacher that had resigned in August of 2020, and rather than hiring a new music teacher, it was determined that they would convert that position into a health position. And we spoke with the campus principal, who indicated that it was the principal's decision to make that conversion. But what we did note was in the email correspondence between the HR director and the assistant superintendent, that there was discussion about referring the principal to the voluntary transfer list to fill the health position once it was converted. And we noted that the voluntary transfer list included 2 individuals, but only one of them had the PE certification, which was the son of the HR director, was the only one with that certification. We also reviewed either some hiring for a position related to an individual who was in a relationship with the daughter of the former HR director. That individual was hired by the district in 2017 as an ACE site coordinator. And based on our discussions with the former HR director, the individual was not in a relationship with their daughter at that point in time. But we did note that the HR director had forwarded the job description to their daughter, and who then forwarded it to the individual that applied for the position and was hired, and was the only candidate without a master's degree, which we also noted was not required for the position. We identified at least 2 instances where individuals who were recommended to the HR director by the interviewing committee were not presented to the board. One of which was in August of 2016, where a interviewing committee for a ACE site coordinator position at Margot Elementary and at Kleckler Held Elementary. The recommendations were not presented to the board. Instead, there was additional interviews that were conducted, which resulted in the recommendation of new candidates, ultimately presented to and approved by the board. So there were, based on our review of the documentation, there was a recommendation for 2 individuals, and it's unclear, what they went to the HR department. They never made it to the board, and it's unclear, where the candidates were not approved and why the decision was made to go back and do additional interviews. We also, in January 2018, we identified a recommendation that was submitted by the interviewing committee for an ELA teaching position at Mary Hogue Middle School. The HR director informed the campus principal that they would need to either recommend a different candidate or hire a permanent substitute for the remainder of the semester. And so that individual that was being recommended was never presented to the board. When we interviewed the former HR director, what we were told was that while they didn't remember the specific instance, that it would have been the former superintendent if there was any situation where a individual that was recommended by the interviewing committee was not presented to the board for approval, that it would have been the superintendent that made that rejection. But we have not identified any documentation to say one way or the other at this point. We also identified instances where candidates recommended by the interviewing committee and the superintendent were not approved by the board. So these were 3 instances where individuals were presented to the board for approval, but not approved by the board. So the first was July 2016 for the Horton AEP principal position, where a candidate was presented and the board did not approve them, and ultimately a different candidate was approved in August of 2016, the following month. And then in November 2016, there was a candidate that was recommended by the interviewing committee and by the superintendent for the ACE site coordinator position at Rico Elementary. It was not approved by the board. Based on a review of the meeting minutes, the board selected the candidates were ranked 1 through 10, and the second ranked candidate was approved instead of the first ranked candidate. In June 2019, there was a recommendation by the interviewing committee for a math teacher position at Mary Hogue Middle School that was also not approved by the board, and ultimately another candidate was recommended at a subsequent meeting. And so our understanding was that the board at that time, asked for the campus to make sure that they had recommended that they considered all of the candidates equally, and then ultimately a different candidate was presented to the board and was approved. In our review of the district's hiring practices, we also identified a hire in January of 2015 related to the campus instructional facilitator position at Weslaco East High School. We noted that there were 16 candidates who applied for the position based on the email correspondence regarding the within the HR department. The interim principal at Weslaco East High School at that time, we determined through the review of the email in Google Drive data that the applicant list was revised, and an additional candidate was added to that list of individuals to be interviewed who had not applied for the position. That same candidate was then recommended for the position by the interviewing committee. And we also were informed that the candidate who was recommended by the interviewing committee and then ultimately approved by the board was not the top ranked candidate initially based on the interviewing committee and discussions with members from that interviewing committee, where we were informed that they were asked to revise their evaluation sheets to reflect the candidate who, same candidate that did not apply originally that was ultimately approved for the position. So in summary, from our review of the hiring practices, we identified a pattern of micromanagement by the board to influence the hiring process, especially during the 2014 to 2016 time period. We noted that candidates who were recommended to the board were rejected, and in certain instances, a less qualified candidate was hired instead. It also appeared that the former HR administrator / HR director influenced the recommendations from the interviewing committee in certain instances. Our review also included, with respect to the practices and procedures of human resources, we looked at job descriptions. We reviewed the job descriptions for 280 positions. We determined that 161 of those have not been revised since September 2014, or at least they had not been revised at the time that we conducted our review in the spring and summer of this year. Some of the instances that we noted with respect to the experience and educational requirements for positions was the job description for ACE site coordinator. The job description was revised in September 2016, where the requirement for a master's degree was removed. The district had previously hired several individuals for the position who did not have a master's degree. And then for that same position in October 2017, in the ACE program being a federal program, in advance of an audit for the federal program, we noted that the job description that was submitted for that end of year audit for ACE site coordinator was revised to change the requirement for a teaching certificate from where it was previously required, it was changed to preferred. And we noted that several of the ACE site coordinators at that time did not have their teaching certificate. We also reviewed the district's salary and compensation as it relates to the compensation plan, the pay scales, as well as the actual payroll register of compensation paid. One of the findings that we had was we noted that the construction maintenance manager position, which was filled in November 2018, it was not included or did not appear to be included in the compensation plan that was approved by the board on August 20th, 2018. It appears that the compensation plan was revised by the HR department to add the position on August 31st, 2018. However, it was not formally approved by the board until December 2018. So in effect, the the individual was hired for the position before the board, formally approved the position into the compensation plan. We identified 17 instances where a position was reclassified to another pay grade during the period of our review. Two of those positions were reclassified twice, and most of, if not all of those reclassifications resulted in a pay increase for that position. And again, the detail of those positions, and there's a table in the report itself that details that. We noted that the assistant athletic director position was reclassified for the 2019-2020 compensation plan from pay grade 103 to pay grade 203, which was a lower pay range, as far as the minimum, midpoint, and maximum. But we also noted that the position retained the same pay range from pay grade 103 instead of being modified to reflect the pay grade 203. So in effect, we had a situation where the position was different compared to the other positions that are of the same pay grade and number of days within that 203. And we noted that there was some in one of the interviews we were discussing about this. We were informed that this was something that the former HR director was aware of, but that was they were told that's the way that it was. It wasn't a mistake, that was the intent was to have that pay grade, stay the same as it had been at pay grade 103. We also analyzed the district's payroll register and specifically related to look at pay increases for administrative and professional employees. So this table shows the distribution of the number of employees within each pay range based on their pay increases. And so what this shows is that over the 5-year period, most of the pay increases were in the 0 to 5%, with over 3,000 individuals over that period that the pay increase was in that range, followed by then 5 to 10%. There's a number of different one-off type of promotions or employees that leave or mid-year that may account for some of the decreases or some of the anomalies where it's over 30%. We reviewed the payroll register with respect to the pay scales and compensation plan to determine whether or not employees were being paid within their pay range. We determined that there were 300 employees, or approximately 300 employees, who received salaries above the maximum for their assigned pay range in 2019 and 2020, compared to around 250 for fiscal year 2019. Many of these positions being part-time employees, so bus drivers, some of the cafeteria staff, those types of positions. We analyzed the extra duty pay based on the information from the payroll register, and during the period of our review, that extra duty pay totaled $35.8 million, the majority of which was related to coaching, the stipends, which were categorized as extra duty pay in the payroll register, summer school, as well as overtime pay for bus drivers, mechanics within the transportation department. We looked at travel allowances, or expense allowances, employee allowances in the payroll register as well, and we identified approximately $700,000 that were travel allowances during this period. We noted that the travel allowance, the monthly amount increased or was increased by the board in 2015 from $200 a month to $500 a month, with 22 employees receiving travel allowances as of fiscal year 2020, which was, I believe, it was 15 or 16 as of 2015. So there was a increase in both the monthly amount as well as the number of employees that were receiving that amount. We determined that there were certain positions that appeared to be receiving travel allowances that do not appear to require regular travel. So there was a review to see if determine which positions receive the travel allowance, and then determine if there is travel required for those positions. And finally, we were asked to look at the district's organizational structure. And we determined that the current structure, which includes 8 individuals reporting directly to the superintendent, we noted that appeared to be above average compared to similar school districts, however, not unreasonable for the size of the district. The operations functions are divided among 4 different organizations, which include business finance, and then support services, then employee benefits and risk management, and then the 4th one being athletics and district facilities. We noted that the employee benefit and risk management is separate from the human resources, even though there is a overlap in the functionality of those departments. We noted that the assistant superintendent and support services position is poorly defined and somewhat functionally misaligned, and responsible for an inconsistent scope of work, the way that it's defined in the organizational chart. We also noted that the executive director of athletics and district facilities position combines 2 broad scopes of responsibility with minimal functional connection. And that is the summary of our findings from the 2 reports. We also have recommendations that I'm not going to read now unless you'd like me to, but they are included in each of the 2 reports.
Thank you, Travis, for that presentation. I'll move over to item 5, discussion on Weaver and Tidwell LOP final forensic audit report. Anybody have any questions?
No, I don't know if we need Travis on there anymore, because most of these questions from this point on should be directed to staff and to obviously not our superintendent right now, but Travis,
well, I like to have him stay on. I think just in case something pertains to his findings, or in what, I like for him to go ahead and stay on, just in case, Travis.
Sure, yeah, no problem. I'm happy to stay on. Yeah, not a problem at all.
I have one. I'm going to go ahead and start, I guess. POs, Travis, I know you've looked at hundreds of districts. How common is it to have the amount that we have, $58.4 million, with no tracing of POs or anything like that? What in your professional opinion, or can you give us a definition to a purchase order or a PO?
I think what I would say is that there's nothing that legally requires within the TEA's purchasing guidelines for every purchase to have a purchase order. I think as a best practice, it's something that does provide that control and approval framework And so one of the common types of analytics that we do is to determine look at the purchases that do not have a purchase order to determine if that's due to the fact that it's circumventing the approval process and could be potential fraud, waste, and abuse. I think what we determined here was based on the nature and the size of these purchases that it did not appear to be an attempt to circumvent those internal controls, given that they were substantial. And most of these, I think there was 15 vendors that accounted for I think 53 million of that were large benefits, payments for those administrative services for the benefits that were authorized by the board and were approved accordingly. So it didn't appear that for the majority of those large ones that was the intent, was to circumvent the internal controls.
But in your opinion, for best practices, POs would be ideal to be utilized throughout the district, correct?
I think in general, as a best practice, that having the purchase orders, would qualify as best practices, is I think in general. Jared, do you have any thoughts on that question?
No, I agree with your response, and that's the right way to look at it.
Okay, thank you. I guess we're going to bounce around with the questions because I'm looking through my notes as well here. Special ed funds, I noticed we had an expenditure of $190,000 or now we're using federal funding there. How important is it to have POs for special ed, in order to remain or have, that internal control for the district?
Yeah, I think it's the same, the same explanation as the purchase order process, and we did identify within the Alio scan for those 5 vendors that we reviewed that there were contracts in place and timesheets and invoices, and so we did, given that there were, I believe it was 29% of the payments that we looked at that did not have a purchase order. We did want to make sure that there was services actually being performed, and I think it would be a little bit more rigorous analysis to for us to get to the level of looking at hourly timesheets to determine that every payment that the services were performed, but in general we did identify that there was that supporting documentation, but certainly I think the best practice would be to have purchase orders in place for 100% of those payments.
Okay, I guess I can go ahead and direct my question to Andres, since we are talking about POs. Andres, is this a common practice that we don't utilize POs for?
We do use purchase orders for special ed consultants, Mr. Trevino. What happens a lot of the time, some of the schools that they had in the purchase order were not serviced and since the invoice did not agree to the purchase order, the item that were included, the accounts payable department doesn't pay it. So then you go to a request for payment. If it matches the PO, it's paid automatically with the purchase order. If it doesn't, it has to go to a request for payment. That is why they did go like that. Most of those payments are like that. There might be some that we didn't, but most of them have a purchase order. I've spoken to the special ed department several times, and we emphasized at the beginning of this year again, do a purchase order larger than before to make sure that you include all the schools, even put an amount, $1,000. Sometimes they say, well, we had more kids, sir. So it came out 1,200. So there wasn't enough money in that purchase order. We have 1,000, there's 1,200 for that line. That's cool. So we ended up with a request to payment. That is for the payment, don't have the PO, but the POs were done. Most of them were done.
If I may just piggyback off of him, we're number 4 out of 112 districts with professional service costs. So number 4 out of 112 is a lot. And these are professional service costs that we're paying, correct? Those are consulting people. I'm guessing they're professional service.
Right.
And to be number 4 out of 100 and something, it's saying something to me. Looking at the data, I'm thinking, okay, we're paying a lot more for this than what other districts are paying for this. Are we supervising that budget versus actual numbers? Because when we look at this data here, we're way over on what we actually budgeted and what was spent. So where's the supervision to say we need to stop, there's no more money in the budget for this?
Well, in the event, it depends on what the item was. For example, special ed, we don't want to stop the services for the kids, but they need it. Some of the consultants could have been staff development. I'm not sure. I would need to see more details so I can provide you a better answer.
One thing I would add, with respect, I think on the professional services, we're referencing the object code 6219, and then the one that's ranked 4th is combining that with the function 41 for general administration of about $1,032,903 was 4th out of 105. I think that's what you're referencing. And I do want to point out that, that there are differences with the way that different school districts classify these expenditures, in that we take that into account. And so, the benchmarking section, the way that we typically use it as kind of a starting place to identify areas for further review. But we are aware that the way that some districts classify, especially with object or function codes, there may be some differences there. So I do want to make that point.
So just to clarify, Travis, so some districts, or we might be including more services in that classification than other districts, or is that what you're trying to say?
There is some element of with the PEMS data where if Weslaco ISD is reporting or classifying expenditures to professional services, and then in this case function 41, general administration, that they may be classified to either a different object code or a different function code, at another school district. And so there is some element of, this is, our goal is to get to the smallest possible cost categories and have apples to apples. And, it's not perfect because there are differences in discretion about assigning codes, and interpretation of where some of these costs fit, but there could be differences there, without looking at the details for the other 112 school districts. It's really hard to say, but in general, that's kind of been something that we do take into consideration.
Mr. Sanchez, just a quick question in regards to the items that Travis pointed out in regards to holiday gifts. Those are gifts for students, staff.
A lot of them are for students.
Students.
Yes, we're giving allocated money to the schools in the section between 160 to 190,000. for all the students of the district. And we don't call it a holiday gift, we call it a hard work for the first semester type of gift, because there's no such a thing as holiday item in the Texas Education Code. But it's for an end of the semester incentive that the students receive, and they've been getting it for a long time.
Okay.
And every year there's about that amount for the students alone.
And is that something where we can give them more ample time so that they can?
Yes,
you know,
we
get
will
the,
work on that, yes.
The proposals.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me was due to timing constraints. And I've been hearing that a lot from, well, the reason why we don't get you the information is because it takes longer on the business side, or, oh, it's because this is taking longer on the business. So those time constraints do affect everything else, you know? So just say there's a better way to manage that would be a great thing to do.
The budget for those items, we did release them late several times. So we will work on that to release them early, the budget. That is not money that is in the budget allocated to the schools. It's usually we come to the board to request the money from fund balance, or we have it in a contingency account like we have it this year, and then we classify it from there to the schools. But we usually check with the superintendent, this is the amount. I'm gonna do it again, get the approval, and then we'll release it. But we have money allocated this year in the contingency account, and we will take it from there to the schools. And we will release it early in October. But they won't run into that situation.
My concern with this is, I know from looking at the other previous budgets that you presented to us,
Yes.
we already have an awards and incentive account. And I believe we have a $500,000 set aside for that. So you're telling me that not only that here, we're moving another $100,000 or whatever it may be over for the holiday incentive, or are you taking it from that budget, from what's budgeted yearly?
The 500,000 that you mentioned, is that the account coded to the awards that we included in the budget?
Yes.
That's only for staff. Most of it is for staff. There might be some for students, but the amount that we give to the schools is a separate amount that we give them.
So that's only
Yes, sir.
staff?
Yes, sir. There might be some schools there as well, but not everybody has the same amount for that.
All right.
Or
I think that's
not everybody
even-
allocated amount for that.
Here's my other concern with that is just like this holiday incentive, time constraint and so forth. All these expenditures are all going to one company, and they're all going to Embroidery Express. Can you please, provide how can every campus, everybody in the district go with one vendor? It almost seems like we're funneling to one vendor. So why would that be happening, or why is that happening? I know that this has been brought up before.
Yes.
Even this right here. So to me, looking at this holiday incentive fund, it's almost a convenient thing to do. Hey, let's wait to the last minute, and we'll put the stipulation where we don't have to do any quotes. And I guarantee you, if we look at all those purchases during that time for the holiday, they all come from one company.
Well, the amount of the budget was not that intentional. Not absolutely, was not intentional, so that that vendor could get the award. That had nothing to do with that.
Okay.
And
I
it was late,
understand that.
we're late, that's our fault, but it had nothing to do with that. When we give the money to the schools, even when they have time, we had approved before that up to 3,000 they could buy from any vendor. Now we changed that. Last time we recommended 500, and it got changed by the board to 300. So they'll go get quotes. And when they get the quotes, and they get the lower price, what can we say?
All right, here's the thing with that, Andres, and this was brought up the other day with the ambulance thing.
Sure.
And it's all public record. It was in an open meeting, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up.
Mention it.
It almost seems like why even have a bid process if we're sitting here manipulating the bid process to get people in? To me here, looking at this, reviewing it over the past few days, to me, it seems like there is some manipulating going on, just like with that ambulance. Hey, let's get this ambulance company in at this price, and coming to find out every year it's exceeding the amount that we're budgeting for, or that we're taking them, and we're not even opening it up to any quote, because they're the only ones that they were under the 48,000 or whatever it was, but they always exceeded that amount.
Well, I did provide information that was given to me.
Yeah.
That was incorrect. I provided an update to you all. And the agenda for tomorrow has the revised information. But the vendor that I mentioned at that time is we did have a request for proposal that the board approved with an option for an extension. So we brought back to the board the extension for the board to extend it or go out for proposals. One of the two vendors that the board approved back then went out of business. So there was only one left. So we talked to the athletic trainer, Mr. Bañuelos at East High School, which was handling the ambulances. And he said, yeah, the company has done good service for us. We checked with the company and said, yeah, we can handle all the service of the district. So we recommended them. But it was within the bid. It was nothing illegal. The numbers were wrong. I understand. And I admit it, but nothing illegal about what we proposed.
I'm not, and I'm not saying it's illegal, but if the process is wrong. Follow your process. If you're going to sit here and bring an ambulance company to us and present to us, hey, it's capped off at $48,000 or whatever it was, that number that was presented. I think it was 48,000, 49,000.
Okay.
And then to come back every single year with the information that you provided, every year we've exceeded that amount. So why not? Why are we sitting here allowing this company to come in at 48,000 and we're only sticking with them?
No, the 48,000 was not the company's figure. That was the figure provided based on number of games, estimated games.
Okay, that's right. Based on that.
It was not the company providing it. We said, these are the games we're going to have. Obviously, I had wrong information, like I said. Number of games at the fee they charge, this is the amount we estimate will be. Not something that the company provided.
Here's another one that now that we're talking about something like that is look at the report.
Coach, let me follow up on Embroidery Express. You know,
Okay.
Mr. Kasner, just a question in regards to Embroidery Express. Did you maybe dig deeper and ask, principals or offices, to see if what the pattern was with using Embroidery Express, or do you feel that business office is funneling to Embroidery Express?
So I think we did dig deeper, and I think what we found was, one, with the, every 2 years they submit, several, 5 or 6 or 7 vendors submit their packages. In some cases, they're required to submit samples of, materials, and there's evaluations that are being completed by both campus principals as well as individuals from the purchasing office. And across the board, it does seem that Embroidery Express is the highest rated vendor they have several different categories. One of them is quality. One of them is the timeliness and responsiveness. And what I gathered was that people are comfortable with a vendor that they've been utilizing or that they've worked with before, and that, in some cases it's maybe because they're local, but some of the other ones were as well. We also I did talk to some principals about this particular vendor to see if there was, kind of what was the reason, for their campus of why they always purchased from there. And one of the things was consistency as far as the, color, meaning there may be some slight differences in the shade of a color with one vendor versus another. And so there may be some kind of advantage for a vendor where they kind of, it extends, wanting to stay consistent with that color, may be a benefit. But we did talk to, we looked at the documentation regarding the evaluations from 2015 and 16 and 17 and 18, and then talked to several people from campuses and purchasing, and it was, they all had, similar reasons for that's why they always, and we did see some memos where I think we included one of them as an exhibit to the report where they said that they had a bad experience with another vendor for, I think it was for custodial apparel, and that they were requesting to, use Embroidery Express because of that. So there was different reasons, but kind of it was kind of across the board. That's the preferred vendor at all the campuses.
And were they on the list for affiliated vendors?
No.
But there is a relation to what that the owner from that company, there is a relationship, or not a relationship. He is a relative to one of the current board members here. Whether it's second or third degree, whatever it may be, there is a connection there with one of our current board members.
And we did talk to the one of the current board members, and I think where we draw the line as far as our process, typically our list of relatives that we're, for each board member, we're looking at what we call the close family members, which would typically be, parents, children, siblings, uncles, and so I think it would be inconsistent to, for one instance to include a second or third cousin, because that's not the approach, and it would, with guidelines related to the TEA and related to purchasing ethics, I think that would also, fall outside of that consanguinity, metric.
Yes, sir.
Before moving on to report number 1, I know we're doing report number 2. I'd like to make a statement. Okay. And after reading report number 2, like I said, there's a lot of information in this report that wasn't in the summary, of course, because due to time. But what I can say is that I've always had a concern as a parent, as a taxpayer, as far as the last couple of years on how our district, where the focus is, especially with our finances and our funds, state, local, federal. And coming onto the board and looking at the budget and looking how things operate, especially on the business side, there has been many concerns for me, because I think that we had lost focus that's my opinion, over the years, especially when you look at awards and incentives, not the process on how it was actually done. I like the report. I like the fact that there is positiveness here. As far as some cases we do need to work on, of course, there is work there. There is management that needs to be, more management that needs to take place as far as some of the expenditures and how we're spending that money and whether it's actually effective or not. Is there any return fixing buses that hardly have any miles, spending $14,000 plus on a bus that's only moved 70 miles? There's concerns there, but those are management. That's internal. That's something that needs to be looked at by department, and also look at the supervisors and the qualification experiences of those individuals to see if they're capable of actually following through with their duties. But when you look at awards and incentives, for instance, that's an example right here, and I'll give you many. Is that we see a pattern where things are budgeted at $500,000, but yet that you're going to spend $800,000 to $900,000. And awards and incentives, a lot of that being on embroidery and on T-shirts. A lot of those funds are coming from local funds. Those are taxpayer dollars. Taxpayer dollars are coming from people's residential income, residential taxes. And those residential taxes are not to be used as far as discretionary, where you can spend them any way you want to. They actually have to be spent on instructional, academic instructional. That's the purpose of it. That's why people work so hard to pay their taxes. And that's just one of many areas where you see that you're spending $800,000 to $900,000 as a district, as an administration. That's what I'm saying. As a whole, over these time, year after year, we budgeted $500,000, we spent $800,000 to $900,000 of people's property taxes. And when in comparison, when you look at the amount that was designated for instructional materials, you're looking at $600,000, $482,000 in 2017. The focus, that's kind of the message that I wanted to send, especially when I was running, and especially when we came in and said, let's do an audit, because I think the audit is a great tool. I think it's good because it highlights where we need to work, and it highlights also what we've been doing well, and we just continue to build on that. Mm-hmm. But the focus, when you look at that, you see that, awards and incentives, $800,000 to $900,000, $600,000 for instructional resources, $482 in 2017 compared to $891. It's a big discrepancy. Instructional resources for the classroom versus T-shirts. And that's why we have a lot of staff. This report is because staff, community members, taxpayers, parents, it was major concerns. Other board members have acknowledged that already as well too, but it's good to do a self-analysis and a review. And even under these conditions, we're still operating at a high level academically in the region and even compared to the state. So that's a plus, because our campuses, our campus admin and our staff there and our support staff are highly effective.
Okay.
regardless of the fact that they've been crying out for more resources and more in the classroom and more help on campus as far as resources as well. But those are the things that we need to look at. I think this report kind of, it highlights that the policies and procedures are in place, but where's our focus? It's like I always tell people, we need to transition our focus. I've said this to board members of I think in some meetings. I said, you stand on the corner of Pike and Westgate, you'll see exactly where our focus has been for the last couple of years. You look at an $8 million skybox or $6 to $8 million skybox, and you look at a multi-million-dollar scoreboard, but then take a look at Weslaco High School and the condition that it's in. We need to refocus on where we're at because our competitors, they're not focusing, they don't have the same focus as we do. And thank God that our report number 2 is nowhere near to close to theirs. At least ours is going to be public for the taxpayers to see where their money went and to know, hey, your money's being focused. We're following policy and procedures. We just need to readjust focus. But with report number 2, I'm very content compared to the other organization that's in our city and some of the things that we've heard about how they were spending money and utilizing taxpayer dollars, because those dollars belong to our taxpayers here within the city as well. Yeah. So I just wanted to note that, and I know that there's issues, like I said, transportation, those are things that need to be reviewed. Our spending, the policy and procedures were in place. Some areas I said are questionable. It's all about perception and how people want to look at that, but that's up to our district administration and our superintendent. But that's a statement that I just wanted to make, that we need to readjust our focus, how our monies are being spent. And it should be in the classroom. It should be student first. And also the time frame. I know Mr. Trevino talked about the turnaround time, and that's always been a concern. But it's surprising to me that we've been talking about air filtration systems. We've been talking about roofs and AC systems. And this is, I know not everybody watches the board meeting, but hopefully they're watching today. And in those board meetings, I've asked, from 2014 to 2019, with tax liens and money that's been taken out of the general fund, you're looking at over $40 million. But yet sitting on our laps this year is over $20 million for roofs, because multiple campuses need roofs, and then AC systems as well. COVID-19, but also outdated and not used, and systems that are not being used and don't have materials and whatnot to upgrade and fix. So and that's I think it was about 40 million for the AC systems that we're looking at. So all in all, you're looking at about $60+ million. My question has been, I asked the previous maintenance director and I asked the current one that we have now, and I said, why between 2014 and 2019, if you spent over $40 million in loans and coming out of the general fund, did you not address or prioritize the roofs and the AC systems? Everybody has a home. Everybody that has a home knows that your roof is priority number 1. And there's no way that all our roofs went out at the same time, because they all need to be repaired this year. And the question that I got from the previous maintenance director and the current one we have now is that they did have the roofs and the AC systems as a priority. And when I asked him, okay, then if they were a priority, then what happened? And he says, well, the board had a different priority. They identified different priorities. And those are the kind of things that I really want to push, because I've said it, I've been very vocal. I want to remove the school board from day-to-day operations as 100%, as much as I possibly can, because in some cases it's not effective and it doesn't have any productivity, and we need to do that. So I'm going to continue on in report number 1. But as far as policies and procedures, they're in place, but our focus, that's kind of the outcry here, is we need to really focus on what's important. Students first, campuses as well, because they're the ones that are productive. They're the ones that they're the ones that produce the product that we want here, which is academic excellence. So reading report number 2, I see it as a board member, but more importantly, as a parent and a taxpayer, am I concerned on where the focus is? Yes. And I'm still going to be concerned until we start to slowly move toward the right direction, which is going student and campus level classrooms first, and everybody else supplements them. So I just wanted to let that be known and on the record.
Can I make a comment? Concerning awards, I did mention in the budget when we approved it that we had put a cap, even since last year, of $25 for those amounts. So that should bring the amount of expenditures to less amount for awards.
And I think a lot of this could have been avoided. Why not just implement the quote system? I worked in the district for all those years, and anytime we had to buy something, we had to submit quotes for you. Why for some and not for all? That's my question. That's what I want to get to.
No, we do have it for all. We do have it for all. We have, I mentioned, we have proposals, approved vendors. The board approved 6 vendors from proposals. From those, we have to have
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
One of you mentioned that it was taking too long to process things. One of the things we did before, we had to have at least three quotes from purchases of $500 or more. Everybody complained, oh, purchase orders taking too long. So you know what? We're going to raise it to 3,000 to facilitate purchases of the schools and departments and make it faster. So everybody started getting happy. So we moved it to 3,000. That is why we use 3,000 for that and any other proposal. We have to do it for maintenance as well. It's not just for that particular awards item. We did it for everything, 3,000.
I think when we're talking about the delay, and I know we've heard it, there's been outcry from like I said, from staff as far as
Yes.
delays, but there is certain cases delays. Construction gets right on our table within seconds. But we talked about the air filtration systems with our previous maintenance director back in December. I think Mr. Medico Garza was there when they were bringing the initial proposal coming in. And so when we're doing that presentation, it's a workshop, it's posted online.
Right.
And during that workshop as well too, we talked about, okay, what steps are we going to take? They were talking about replacing AC systems at the time. We didn't have ESSER funds. We didn't know how much we're going to get or if we're going to have them. And the proposal was pretty much unrealistic. There was no way that we were going to be able to afford that amount. It was a massive amount. I don't remember. I don't want to say the exact numbers, but it was double-digit millions. There was no way that we were going to address all the campuses like that. And then finally in the presentation, I think I remember Mr. Garza was there. One of the board trustees asked, well, what's that in the corner, that little picture there? And he says, oh, that's a HEPA filtration system. And then he stepped up and he started talking about the HEPA filtration system, talking about how it's used in surgical wards, it's throughout hospitals, throughout the nation, it's affordable, it's easily to replace in maintenance, and it's highly effective. And we asked him, sir, why did we not go this route? Here we are in December talking about filtration systems. We already had kids coming back, even though we had a large percentage still at the campus. Right. And I asked him, why did you go this route? Why didn't you show this to the previous board? He says, we did, but they decided to go on a different route. One that was unattainable. There was no way we're going to afford that other method. There was no way that even at the time they were even able to contract all the campuses, even if we did have the money. And so, see, that's what I'm saying. When we're looking at our expenditures and payments to vendors and contractors and whatnot, the process is fine, but the focus is wrong. So that's what I'm saying. Why can we get construction overnight across the board getting to the table, but yet other issues like the filtration systems, I think there was some other issues that we're looking at, more desk shields, and we're looking at the telemed services, other campus-based, classroom-based initiatives take just too long compared to construction. Construction comes to the table quick. It gets done, processes, bid it out, etc. But yet those classroom-level initiatives take just too long. We're barely going to talk about telemed, and we brought that back up in December of 2020. And then look at the timeline also for those HEPA filter systems that we put in every single classroom, above capacity, make our classrooms entirely safe, and we put them through all our schools, and they even moved forward and did that even in the buses as well too. So, but that took time, and that took just too long. So the administration, what I'm trying to say is, let's focus on classroom initiatives and let's do as much possible, maybe hopefully at the same level as construction, and then that way we can get campuses and students the resources they need and on time. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, well.
I would, Doctor, like to see us implement it, and yes, I know, just like right now, I think there's 4 or 5 companies ranked, correct? So now when unless you're going for something over $3,000, you already have those companies there, correct?
For incentives?
For incentives or
Yeah,
whatever.
for
they
incentive,
need.
yes. It depends on the item. How many
Okay.
companies bid on the proposal?
I would like to see us bring that limit down and request quotes.
Did we
Even
not bring
from
the
that-
limit down?
Say that, which item is that again?
Just in general, instead of having the limit at $3,000, but I think we
Yeah,
brought
we
that.
cut it down to 500. On the awards, the board changed it to 300.
300.
The other way we went,
300.
300.
Okay, we did change that.
Awards and incentives, 300. We changed it.
Now, here's the other, here's another one where I'm gonna question the process, Andres, and to me, you guys are the ones in charge. Whatever you bring to us, it needs to be, you're our eyes and ears. And here I was looking over the report and I looked back for the transportation. I noticed that in June or sometime back, there had been a proposal sent out requesting bids, and I think 4 responded. And one at
BTR.
MVTR, they were left out. So here recently, I just come to find out that in June, we accepted that. I guess you guys reopened it up again.
I believe so.
It was reopened up again. To me, it's a big red flag, especially after looking all the expenditures that have gone to that company. And after noticing that there's a relation there, that the nephew is married to the niece of the owner of the other company, that the owner from the other company is coming on the campus, offering tickets, all that. I mean, it's all in the report.
I wonder
I know, yes. I mean, yes, you may not know that part, but you guys, even Mr. La Rosa, I think that they fall under you. Why would we allow, hey, if he missed a deadline, he missed a deadline. Why are we catering to companies is my question. Why would we ever reopen it up instead of using the four that took the time to apply correctly, to submit the bid? Why would we open it back up months later and allow this company to come in? And this is where I'm blaming it on you, because you're our eyes and ears. I don't know who this company or whatever, or why we reopened it. But I listened to the excuse that was written on here, and it doesn't make sense. Because most of these companies that are applying here or that are submitting proposals, they're all credible companies. I mean, that's what they do. So why sit here and allow us to? I feel like you allowed us to walk right into it. And no, I mean, I'm going to call it what it is. You may sit there and I'm going to call it what it is. You guys are there to be our watchful eye. And I know maybe, he stated his reasons why, and they're in here in the audit report. But to me, it just does not make sense to reopen it up, because it almost seems like we are catering to one company, and that's not the way things should be.
That's very good. Correct.
So those are the practices that, for me, bring the lack of confidence in how we're doing things. There's a big lack of confidence in our internal control, from HR practices to budgeting to everything we're doing right now. You submit a budget to us, and coming to find out now by looking at all our forms, everything always exceeds the budgeted amount. So when are we ever going to function correctly and just stay at the appropriate level that we submit, that we agree to, this past August? So that's a big concern of mine when I see us manipulating the bid process.
I think in one case, Mr. Trevino was talking about, there's tactics in school districts that people utilize sometimes for whatever reason it may be, but like in one case in here in the audit and the investigation report for report number 2, there's an instance where the whole fleet was being serviced, and I think it ranged $400 or $500 in that range. The whole fleet was being serviced, and then there was independent POs that were done for every single bus, rather than doing one large PO for the service overall for the entire fleet. And then you would have to at that point, you would probably hit the requirements where you have to go out for bids. It just kind of didn't make sense. So like those type of things, it's noted in the report. That's why I don't want you, I'm not questioning you. I'm just highlighting that. I know that he brought up the ambulance service the other time, and we already have a longitudinal history that these individuals are going to pass the 50,000 threshold or whatever the case may be. Then let's just follow through. And then I know it'll take a little bit longer, but we go out to bid for process, and we just follow our policy and protocols. We don't want to circumvent any type of, and I'm not saying you are, but we don't want to create a situation where it looks that way, right, or it's apparent that way, that we're kind of going by our controls, past our controls. And I think that's just a concern. It's just to identify that. I think that's.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Mark, because that was the that was one of the things I wanted to hit on, was the 22 buses, 22 different invoices. How does that not come up as a red flag for us? When I know you guys questioned him at one point for the excessive amount of expenditures, but there was no follow through. We allowed it to continue to happen. What have we done to control that spending right now? Because obviously that's over budgeted. I don't think is it an open budget for repairing old buses?
No, no.
That's what it looks like to me.
It's on the agenda tomorrow, isn't it?
Yes. So that right there, I mean, you guys tell me how we are going around the system. And you guys are directly, or I mean, you are because you write the checks and you sign off on that. Mr. La Rosa, you're in charge because that's your department. And for us to allow that to happen, that's a big major red flag. In any, if that was happening in any other department, I mean, it wouldn't be allowed in the athletic department or anything else. Why would we allow it here is my question.
I don't have an answer to give you right now. I need to look
Yeah,
at
I
that
mean,
report
it's-
better.
I-
But I tell
so-
you anything else.
As I was reviewing it, so I guess I'm gonna feel whatever I was imagining or whatever I'm thinking or whatever I'm thinking is that's exactly what's happening. And we are manipulating the system. That's my problem here, the process. And that's why there is a lack of confidence in everything we're doing because this is not right. And, you know, thankfully we did this audit because hopefully this will align us to do the right thing, which we're not in every aspect. And this right here is our checks and balances, which we don't have. Because if we're allowing that, then you should be held responsible for that, Mr. La Rosa, and everybody else, and yourself, because you're the one looking at that budget.
And Coach Trevino, that is one of the recommendations from Weaver and Tidwell, as far as the recommendation for the district to review and potentially modify, if necessary, the procurement process for bus repair and maintenance expenditures to ensure that the process meets the district's guidelines for obtaining multiple quotes and is also aligned with the transportation goals for timeliness of repairs and maintenance. So we will adhere and enforce these internal controls, right, and recommendations from the firm.
I feel like since we came on board back last year, we've known about a lot of these situations going on. And we've been asking and out crying, kicking and screaming, please do something, please help, please move on this. And we meet hesitance. There's resistance all the time to, can you please check up, for example, we're number 5, once again, professional contracted service or professional services, number 4, that includes value risk consulting, that includes therapies, consultants. When we were elected, we told the people we're going to listen. We're listening to all the concerns. And of course, people come to you and they tell you, look into this, look into that. One thing, big one was consulting. Weslaco spends a lot on consultants. The report is here, but Mr. De La Rosa worked with Valley Risk Consulting, and we are trying to, we have them. They're our consultants right now, Valley Risk Consulting, right? And we keep bringing them back to the agenda. I see a conflict of interest there. If you work for somebody and then we're trying to get them to come back and help Weslaco, well, that's it doesn't look right. And then I'm looking at those therapies, those consultants. We kept saying, pushing. We need an in-house OT. We're spending too much on consultants. We need an in-house physical therapist. We're spending too much on consultants. Kicking and screaming about it. And I had to go, there's a lot of emails and stuff, but it got done this year. Thank God, with the help of you guys, you guys helped out, but there's a lot of spending on those professional services, those consultants. And I come to find out that some of those therapies are family members of other board members in other cities. So is there a conflict of interest? I don't know. We didn't dig into that to see, but there's too much spending on these consultants when we have people in our district who can do it in-house, and it doesn't make sense. And when I feel like we're trying to just hide it and let them come in and let's pay them on this, they're going to help us when we really don't need to. So yes, people are telling us these things. We're asking for help. Let's move on that, because the focus, like Mr. De Los Santos said, it's the students, it's the kids. That's what we're here for. It's not, let's help this company and let's help that company. It's the kids. And this really opened up our eyes when we see that we're top ranked for these expenses. So that's just what I wanted to say. And that's it.
Okay.
Would you like us to take a deeper dive into the consulting services and then see consulting services and then a breakdown of?
Yeah, I'm sure we need some. I mean, but not all probably, or not so many. And I see the people here in the crowd that they work in the district too that are saying, yes, it's true. You know, we work there and we see it. And so, yeah, if we could look into that, and that would be great.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Kasner, I know I took some notes last night, and I know our bus increased from 2015 to 2020, and I had it somewhere. It jumped up like from $6,000 maybe a quarter that was going to this to this company or any other company, to strictly going to MVTR, and it was a substantial amount per quarter. I think it was like 40-something thousand. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, it was. So what we say in the report, that the payments were, well, from an annual standpoint, they tripled from 54,000 in fiscal year 2016 to over 173,000 in fiscal year 2017. So that's kind of on an annual basis. But looking at the quarterly bars on page 39 of report number 2, that the you know, I don't want to try to, 30 to 50,000 seems to be kind of the per quarter is the, typical range for payments to MVTR for bus repair and maintenance.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I just found it here on that page. Yes, we went from 6,000 a quarter prior to July 2016 to $42,000 per quarter. Now, again, but my question is going to be to Mr. La Rosa, since you are directly over this, and I don't know when you acquired that as under your umbrella, but that's a substantial amount of spending that's happening in that department. And I know buses, but I know in 2018 we just got a brand new fleet.
I believe, good evening, Mr. Trevino, members of the board,
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez. So I believe my tenure as overseeing the department took over, I believe, I'm going to say 2016, 2017. But to answer your question, we did devise a procedure and a process where we did realize that there was, a lot of money being spent on maintenance. So there was a process that was created, where a paper trail, if you will, and I'm sure Mr. Kasner's seen all the documentation, where the mechanic, in essence, identifies a problem, writes a memo to the shop foreman that says, bus 25 needs this, it's beyond my expertise, and we don't have the parts, whatever the reason may be. The shop foreman or the shop supervisor looks at that memo and agrees with it or disagrees with it, and writes a memo to the transportation department or the transportation director recommending the service, and then the director, puts in the PO. So we did try to, put in a process where we try to control those expenses. I do have a wide range of expertise. Unfortunately, mechanics is not one of them. So we do have to take the word of the people that are on the ground, actually doing the work on the fleet. And of course, safety is paramount. I mean, we don't want to take any chances with the safety of our students, with a brake line failing or a suspension, coming undone, a tire falling off, God forbid. So before the director took over, the shape of the fleet, especially when I started getting involved, we had a very, very old fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And, for lack of a better term, the flood was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, because we were able to, purchase these new units, with the insurance proceeds. So there is, procedures and processes in place, but I believe we've taken a, sharper look at it over the last couple of years, and that has gone down. But certainly, after I have a chance to read the report, and we'll come back to you with recommendations and things we're going to do to address these issues.
I would, and you brought up the flood. In 2018, we got new buses. I know I would like to see, I guess here it is right here, we got new buses our expenditures still continued through 2019, quarter one, or really fourth quarter. I don't know when exactly we got those buses, and I think it was probably during the second quarter. So here we are in the third quarter. We have brand new buses, and we're still spending close to $50,000. Fourth quarter, we spent $55,000 in that for that quarter. Then we go back to 2019 for the year 2019. We have brand new buses and we're still spending close to $40,000. Are we spending that amount on those old buses, on the 21 spare buses that have less than 100 miles?
Those more than likely were what we're spending the money on, because again, the new buses had warranty work. So again, to keep those up and running and safe, because they were used, not so much in 2020, but in 2019, when we were full throttle, even in 2018 with events and stuff like that. And even though buses are new, they do break down and they go to the dealer for maintenance work or warranty work. So that's when we have to go back to the spares and run those buses so we can continue to maintain operations. So it is still, even though they're not being utilized, but we still have to maintain that old fleet, make sure they run when we need them.
Mr. Kasner, I believe I saw one of the exhibits that you gave us. There was a price per mile for each bus, what it cost to run the bus for each mile that it ran. Do you have those that you could possibly show us? Because I remember thinking, wow, that is an outstanding dollar amount per mile for each bus.
Yeah, I can share my screen here. Let me find that chart.
And if you can explain exactly what that means.
Are you able to see this clearly enough?
It's a little small, but we can see it.
This was, we're trying to calculate for the 21 spare buses, the mileage, from 2018 through May of 2021 to kind of compare the dollars that were being spent for the repair and maintenance, and then correlate that to the mileage, the usage for some of these spare buses. And so, I guess what we were showing in this chart, and some of the buses, there were, I think what we saw from our review in general, that on average it was about 12,000 miles a year for the active fleet. So some of the buses were used. There were some that had little usage, and I know there is the special education buses. There may be reasons why those are not being utilized that are but they need to remain in the fleet. But this column right here, so this column is the miles from September 2018, which was the last mileage report that we were able to locate. Minus, or I guess May 21 minus September 2018, and the mileage over that 2.5-year period. And then this column represents the dollars, the repair costs, and just the repair costs, paid to MVTR. I guess potentially there could be other vendors if they were taken to other vendors for repair. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, if we're looking at this first one, this 2004 bus, bus number 60, formerly bus 7, I guess what it would show is 72 miles over the 2.5-year period, with repair costs of $16,916, and then then we calculate just from a kind of a metric standpoint, the repair cost per mile being $236.
No, I'm not a mechanic, but I'm pretty sure that 72 miles doesn't cost me $16,000 of repair costs at $236 a mile for a bus to run. It just doesn't make sense. 57 miles on the second bus, and it costs $12,700 to fix it. So it cost us $225 per mile when that bus moved. It doesn't make sense.
Mr. Kasner, do you show if these repairs were ongoing, or was it just an initial to get it up to speed in regards to when they were classified as a spare bus?
Yeah, so we have an appendix that has a dashboard for each of the 21 spare buses that itemizes what the repair costs are. And so I can pull up one of these if we want to look at it. It's probably going to be small, but I can at least let's see if there's it looks like it's Appendix 11 to Report 2 has that detailed analysis for each of the 21 spare buses, and so that would contain kind of the itemized invoice repairs for that make up, these dollar amounts in this table.
I have a question.
When you guys get those, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, man. You're still.
I was just going to ask, when you get those requests for the POs, do they have what exactly is going to be fixed in the amount?
Yes, ma'am, we have all that data.
Okay, so you guys knew what was being fixed for $16,000.
Yes, all that data exists. So I can have the director, once we take a look at this, we can have the director compile a report and send it to y'all and let y'all know what exactly was done to these units.
But I guess let me piggyback off of what Jackie's asking, because there was a percentage there where there was no purchase orders, POs for some of these jobs that were done here, weren't there?
There was the emergency purchase period after the flood in June of 2018, where the board authorized that for timely or expediency of getting the buses back up and running, that the purchase orders were not required for. And one of the areas where we saw that was with the repairs for the buses, and I think there were some facility repairs from the damage that also. There were some expenditures there under that emergency purchase authorization.
Okay.
Okay. I had a question, sir, but it involves report number 1 for Travis. And Travis, when we talk about micromanagement in the, I know you had your summary, but in the report itself, it states there that there's evidence of, and I know you had witness responses. Those are in the appendices and whatnot, and you had statements from people that you interviewed, current employees, past employees, and there's statements of micromanagement. And then you also provided the timeline of the human resources director, the ex-human resource director at the time, and how they got hired in the process of the fact that they didn't have the qualifications experience compared to the majority of the people that they applied against, and they competed for that position. But one of my questions is out of those statements, do you feel from your investigation that there was a manipulation of the hiring process throughout those years, and with that department and the leadership that was there at the department? Is that what you have as far as all the responses from staff, that there's micromanagement? Like the definition of micromanagement, that's my question. Do you think that the board was micromanaging the hiring process from what the evidence that you saw and the responses that you received?
So I think what I would say was, in what we said in the report, that there was a pattern of micromanagement where candidates who were evaluated and recommended by the interviewing committee, where they had a process for, the applications and the job postings and the interviews, and the interview committee was established in a evaluation process that was conducted and concluding to recommend a candidate, to the HR department, and then, the superintendent and ultimately the board, that the candidate that the campus recommends, that when we see instances where they're not approved for various reasons and at different points in the process, especially when it appears to be that they are the most qualified candidate, and or the candidate that the campus feels is the best fit for their campus, then I think some of the instances we highlighted would fall into that category of, some micromanagement.
Because the concerns and the reason of the audit, which, like I said, I defend the audit. I think it's a great tool. I think it gives you a baseline on currently where you're at in your district. You're doing a self-evaluation, the good and the bad. I think it's a great investment, especially for a district of our size. It's $200+ million per year. There is no teachers, paraprofessionals, staff within departments. They all get evaluated. District level staff evaluate amongst their department by the superintendent, but more importantly, the board. And I think that this is a great tool that evaluates also the board to see how effective it was, to see if they truly had the best interests of the students at mind. And that's why I think that this should be done every sixth year. I think that there should be a forensic audit, and I think it should be done because it's a very resourceful tool, like I said, to self-evaluate, and two, as a deterrent for any type of corruption, any type of what we like to call here in the Valley, compadrismo, and things of that nature. So this is a very, very important tool. I can go down a laundry list of other items that I feel that we've overspent on in the past years, even using a construction PowerPoint presentation that was given a few years back. We spend a lot of money sometimes in certain areas that we shouldn't have, but I think this is a very valuable tool for the taxpayers because it highlights the fact there's always been a stigma in Weslaco, and that is that you have to know somebody to get in. And this currently shows that. There are so many people involved, including our board, that should have known better when that human resources director was hired that they weren't qualified. And if you look at the list, and it's in the report of the people that they interviewed against, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that you had to be completely unqualified as a board member or an administrator at the time to say this individual beats out these other 12. That's a fact because those other individuals had experience. Those other individuals had their degrees. I mean, they had everything in place, and it's in the report. It's there. It clearly shows, and that right there is a failure not only in governance but management. And that's why report number 1, there's consistent evidence that you see where policy and procedures weren't followed. Of course, like you said in the report, there's a manipulation of the hiring process, not only in the boardroom, not only in the executive, but even before it even got to the board. There's examples of that. And that's why we're deciding and we're pushing, and you'll see that in the upcoming agenda, trustees are saying we need to take minutes in executive also. We need to actually do recordings. That's what one of the trustees brought up, and it's a great idea, and it's allowed because we have to be as transparent as possible, and then we also have to be accountable. Because by the time that you see here, when you look in the Valley and you look at the news, board members are held accountable when it's too late. And so this type of report keeps everybody in check and allows them to realize, hey, somebody's going to evaluate me 5 years down the line. And then what you see here is you see things. When you look at this report, there's so much in there. I know that due to time, you kept it short because if not, we would be here a lot longer. But if you go read report number 1, you see not only but job descriptions were being tailored, modified. You see the fact that people's recommendations were being modified before they got back. You saw that we have gas stipends. We have gas stipends that are $6,000 a year. I asked in one of the previous board meetings, I asked the administration at the time, I said, what are these gas stipends for? I thought that they entailed maybe trips to San Antonio, maybe trips to Houston. No, they said it's just to get to work and to drive around the school system here. We're not Houston. We're not Dallas. It doesn't take 40 minutes to get to a campus. I'm sorry. There's no way that you're spending $125 a week in fuel because if you're doing that, you're probably not doing your job. You're spending too much time in your car. I know firsthand because I put a lot of miles in outside of my work, and I don't go through 2 gallons of gas. There's no, and so $6,000 a year, nobody else gets that. And I do want to have our current interim superintendent to see and show me another district in the Valley that gives their executive level team $6,000. Mind you, that out of the list of people that are getting $6,000, some of them are desk office jobs. So they never leave the building. They're not required to. So there's a lot of evaluation that we need to go back. Our extra duty pay as well, one of the appendixes. We are spending considerable amounts on duty and extra duty pay. And there's questions on there. And I know I even called to verify with you because I don't like to come out here and talk about things unless they've been verified. And I asked you, under extra duty pay, there's certain individuals there with in the $50,000, $40,000 range, 30, $50,000, $40,000. That's kind of high. I understand 20,000, 30 maybe because of coaches and the large stipends that we have. But some of the individuals were not coaches and they're still in the $40,000, $50,000 range. And you stated that you contacted the district to verify and said that that's how it's recorded in I think our PEM system for those expenses. We look at in the report too, you see that there is no, you stated, and these are the words that are in the report, no justification for reclassification of positions. People went from director to executive director, and they saw in certain years, and it was just about a very small time frame that this happened. It was concerns from the community, concerns from staff. They felt it was unfair because they didn't receive the pay raise that these individuals did. I, for one, thought that it was not true. I thought this is probably an accusation that doesn't have any merit. Turns out in the report that it's true. You have a laundry list of individuals that got reclassified their titles, no justification whatsoever because duties remained the same, but they saw 25.4% increase from midpoint, 22.9% increase from midpoint, 11.4% increase from midpoint. Those are massive raises. And in the report, it says it's completely unjustified. There's no justification for them. There was no response, but it was allowed and it was approved. And there multiple people were involved with that as well.
And if I may add, Mr. Santos, even when people went to a lower pay class, they were kept at the same salary and not demoted.
Right. That's another thing, pay scales. Some pay scales, when you look at them, people are demoted, but they're allowed to keep their salary. Imagine that. There's no other job that I think that you can find that you're going to, in the public that you're going to find that, where people are actually demoted, moved to a lower position, but yet they're allowed to keep their pay that they were receiving with the additional higher level duties that they had before. You see that in the report, there's emails, there's statements, there's all types of things that come into play. But the most disturbing one is, of course, like I said, our pay structure and salary. Were people getting the proper raises? All this additional work now we have to do because at the beginning we had a department that wasn't running effectively, and now we have to go back, invest all this manpower and all this time. You see people with these raises. I mean, when we have our paraprofessional hourly staff, when they see a 3% raise, they're looking at cents. They're looking at somebody's making $12, they're making maybe going up 36 cents. You compare that to somebody who has a professional salary at maybe 80, 90,000 at the time, and they go up 25.4%. That's massive. That's thousands. Nobody else saw that. And that's the unfairness. And was the concerns from the staff and the community as well, because our staff, they are community members. We've gotten to a point in this district because of the micromanagement and the fear tactics and the chokehold that was on the district at the time, the staff became an ID number. And that's how they felt. A lot of them felt that way, that they were just another ID number, that they didn't have a say, they couldn't talk, they couldn't discuss. That was a major issue. And this was all true. They talked about this. These things were things that people brought up. I didn't think there was a $6,000 gas stipend, lo and behold. I didn't think that those reclassifications, lo and behold. People get started on pay scales at the highest level. They don't start at the low end of their pay scale. They start at the mid or even higher. And that was happening even while we were sitting here. I know, because we questioned some positions and I said, this person doesn't have experience and whatnot. How are they making so much? And they looked at it and they said, well, that's the pay scale. I said, no, it's not. I said, there's no way that individual has enough weight, what they call weight, because of your qualifications, experience in the past, that they're starting at that amount, or something's wrong with the way we're paying people, because we're paying way too much. And that kind of leads to our financial issues. But sure and behold, when they came back and they checked, they were at the maximum of the pay scale, that individual. They hadn't even worked in the district and they were already coming in at the max of that allotted pay scale. So there's a lot that we have to evaluate in how things are done, because there is some unfairness and there's things that we do have to check. And that's one of the main concerns that I had with this report and report one, is the fact that this was from the beginning planned, implemented. You see the timeline, just like you said yourself, Mr. Kasner, in your report. You said that in January that we had an opening, but yet we didn't decide to fill it until September. And then when we did, we went ahead and we went with the lower position. Instead of going with the director, we went with the assistant for HR. And then lo and behold, after some cases, like noted in the report, now once the individual met the minimum qualifications, then they got hired as director. And you see somebody jump up from the $40,000 range all the way to $101,000 plus a $6,000 gas stipend. Meanwhile, we have teachers' pay scales that move hardly a fraction over years. There's teachers in our classroom. Teachers are and I work in a school system, and I know everybody's important. I'm a supplemental employee. My position in the school system is to supplement the campuses and supplement the instruction. Everyone that's not actually in the classroom is a supplemental employee, except for the principal of the campus, which is actually the management, the administrator. But we all are a team, and we supplement that classroom. And yet our teachers and our instructional paraprofessionals and everybody else, their pay, if you look at it compared to what we were seeing here at the executive level, was moving at a fraction, at a snail pace. But everybody else was just skyrocketing in as far as at the executive level. And there's no answer for it. We've been here for months. We've been asking, and there's no answer for it. There's no answer how somebody can come right off, graduating from high school with just a couple years out of high school, and they're already in the $70,000 range. And yet we have teachers that'll work countlessly for decades, 10, 20, 30 years, and they'll never see that pay. So we got big problems. We got to reevaluate everything, and we have to go back and look, because there has been mismanagement, because the board is too involved. At some point in the timeline of our school district, the board was just implemented too much. And I saw it firsthand. That's why I stopped stop asking for committee meetings and I stopped participating, because we weren't listening, we were participating, and that's wrong. Administration, they need to really get with the program, and you need to come already with the initiatives that you want. The board doesn't know more than you. They're not qualified and experienced to make the decisions for the administration, because they're not there day to day. And that's why I keep voicing that we have to remove the board from day-to-day operations and keep it at policy and governance only. There is no way that there's a board member, even working in the educational field, or whether you're a principal or even an ex-superintendent, that you can override and supersede the recommendation from administration, because they're actually there. They're on the ground on day-to-day, and they know what they need. They know the culture and climate for their departments and their campuses. So the committees, that was one thing that I had mentioned also that I wanted to end, because it seemed like every single major component was broken down to committee, and then board members from previous boards were all split up into these categories, whether it was finance, curriculum, construction, especially, etc. And some of those recommendations and influences were costly. And realistically, like I said, as a board member and part of a board, and also working within an educational setting, it's just I've never seen that before. Even where I've worked, I've never seen anything like this, where you've seen the board so involved in the day-to-day operations and making recommendations and whatnot. So that's what we have to do here. We have to look at who we're bringing in, look at the history. And this is to voters. Now I'm speaking to voters and also staff. Like I said, they did feel that way. There was a large concern about political influence. There's a large concern of people being politically attacked if they were to speak up. And you see that the situation was put into place where there was micromanagement and there was control. And what does that lead to? Voter oppression, because you're putting fear into the staff, so they can't go out there and recruit. They can't go out there and talk about the issues just like everyone else can. They can't have tournaments and whatnot, because they're oppressed and because they can't speak up. And that's one of the things that I saw here, is we need to let our staff know that they're more powerful than anything else. They're not just employee ID numbers. I'm going to go back to that. They are parents, they're taxpayers, and they're voters. So they're more powerful than they know, because if they need to step up also, and also voters, we all do. I'm guilty of it too. I'm part of the ownership of this report, because over the past years, I didn't input the work. I didn't step up to the plate. And we have to do that. We have to look at and vet who's running for school board. I understand a lot of people say, well, it's just a school board position, it's not important. No, it is. It's one of the largest employers in our city. It's over $200+ million of your taxpayer dollars. And more importantly, there's two things that parents care about the most, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, is that we care about the health of our children and the education of our children. So we need to step up, and we need to participate in the election process, because this type of micromanagement and this type of things that are in place in report number 1 and these negative actions, that's because we did not vet properly the people that are running. We need to make sure that they sell themselves. We need to make sure that they sell themselves and why they belong on the board. The days of just putting your name really big on a sign or your face really big on the sign, those are over. You need to sell yourself now. People want to know who's actually running, who's going to represent me on the board, who's going to manage these funds that belong to my kids. These funds belong to every single student in our school district. And our job is to make sure that not even a dollar slips through our fingers, because every time we do, that's a dollar that we lose in the classroom. And that's where our focus should be. And it's our responsibility as voters to look at this report, look at it and see what was happening. How many people were victims in this report? This happened a lot. And I can tell you why, because I've had impromptu conversations with some people, and you'll be surprised at how many people have actually told me that they've gone through this process or this situation where they went, they interviewed, they were ranked number 1, and yet they didn't make it to the board somehow. They fell through. I talked to an individual, and I'm only going to say this because he was a client of mine, and he discussed to me that he was hired in Weslaco ISD. I told him, why are you driving all the way to Mission? And he says, oh, because I had never got hired. I got hired in Weslaco, he told me. I got hired in Weslaco ISD. I got hired at a middle school for an art position. And this person has awards in Mission. He's taking his class to the actual Washington, D.C. And I said, what happened to him? And he told me, just out of the blue, a random individual that I'm talking to. And then he tells me, he says he applied for a fine arts position in 2019, 18-19 school year at one of our middle schools. He got hired. He was recommended number 1. He was told by the principal, and I give that principal credit. He was told by the principal that he was recommended, but yet he was called back 2 days later and told that he's not going to the board because he's not going to go. He's not going to be nominated because the board wanted to go in a different direction. And that's what this principal told this individual. And I was grateful that the principal actually called him back and told him the truth. But like I said, this has happened for years. Our community knows it. Our staff knows it. Everybody knew it. And as much as I tried to be optimistic and hoping that it wasn't the truth, it was.
Mark, if I may add, one of our the other board members, obviously they're not here, I don't know, but there's another one that went on record and onto a newspaper article said, I don't know if I'm not aware of anything wrong going on when we have had these talks and these meetings about things like this before. And that is the frustration that we face, to have no, there's nothing wrong. I don't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about. It's in black and white, the numbers in front of us, but there's nothing wrong with them. That is very frustrating to sit here and try, and you see what needs to be fixed, but there's too many obstacles to get over to fix them. I remember I asked Mr. Kasner at the very beginning of our forensic audit, I said, do you guys usually suspend people while the investigation is going on? And he said, no, usually they've already been suspended. They get to us, the audit, after suspension so that we can investigate what exactly happened. But of course, in Weslaco, sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't work the way other people do. You know, we know what's going on, but we don't act, or we don't move on things because this person doesn't want me to, or I can't because I'm going to get him or her in trouble. And there's always some kind of obstacle, even though we know when we see what's wrong, there's always a denial of no, leave it alone. Just turn away. Don't pay attention to it. I know there's instances here in our district, employees have told me I was suspended. They suspended me because they were going to investigate. Well, how come we can do that to our employees who are, at the lower levels? But here, when we know things are going on, we didn't suspend any of the people that were under investigation. Now, imagine if you would have turned the tables. A lot of people would have been very unhappy if you would have said, you're suspended during this investigation, during this forensic audit, and you are too, because we've had this information for a long time. You guys are seeing it for the very first time today. We've already had it for a couple of months. And it's very frustrating that when we want to see something happen, you want to fix things, they don't get fixed. And that's the frustration that we're facing right now. And when I'm seeing these interview committees and these high level positions, highly sought positions, and I see these interviews going on by people who you just have a lack of confidence in because of everything you're reading, it's kind of hard to trust with the system and the process. So it's frustrating, and we're going to try to do our best to fix what we can with everybody's help. Like Mr. Dos Santos said, the voters, Mr. Kasner and his audit team did a great job. and interim is here, and the board, we're going to work together to try to fix what we have to, but we have to work as a team together.
One of the major factors, like, and I know we talked about that, is how do we make sure that the hiring process is as valid as possible without any type of influence from the outside of the school district or even from within. And one of the things that we had brought up before was moving into a new system where there's HR systems that you can implement, software, where people are applying online, uploading their information, and as soon as it's posted, the director or the campus administrator gets a code, a username and a password, and they can log in, and they're seeing in real time every single person that's applying. In real time, they're getting their application, they're seeing the process. Once the window is closed for all applicants, they already know that there was 18 applicants. HR does its process on vetting to make sure that all the requirements are there, all the documentation is there. And then once that is done, those individuals are then highlighted that they're available to be interviewed and called in. And at that time, the administrator, if he wants to, he may have liked somebody that wasn't highlighted. Then they can check and ask, okay, why wasn't this person identified? And they can say, well, they're missing this document, whatever the case may be. And we can have follow through, because we have a lot of people slip through the cracks. We have a lot of people that are highly qualified that never get to the table. And that's a fact.
Dr. Valdez, if I may ask you, if I may cut in really quickly, a lot of the public, I guess the perception seems to be the board hires the people. The board hires people. We don't hire people. Can you explain to the public who's listening, how does a candidate who gets interviewed get a job at Weslaco ISD?
The only individual you hire as a board is the superintendent. That's it. In Weslaco right now, we are implementing systems when it comes to HR as far as the screening process, because you have to have that vetted. You have to review all the applicants, right? So we do have a system right now in place that is pretty transparent, not as transparent as Mr. De Los Santos is describing, but the goal is to get to that point. But right now, what we do is we have HR personnel. They don't do the official screening. It's upper leadership, executive leadership that will sit in that interview committee, be part of the screening. And what happens is, so we get a list of the applicants from HR. HR will note all the qualifications that individual has, whether they met the qualifications for the job, the years of experience needed, and so forth. The composition of the committees has changed extremely. If you note or you reference the reports, most of the committees only consisted of 2 or 3 people, correct?
Yes, ma'am. 2 to 3.
Now the composition of the committees include, and that's done through executive leadership, whether it's Mr. Aguilar, myself, others that serve on cabinet, are doing it right now, just to make sure that the process is fair and just for all who apply. And so we do the screening, and then we do the composition of the committees. Now we include like 9, 10, or 11 individuals. It's no longer just 2 or 3.
Yeah,
and so the feedback we're getting from candidates. So I've been here for 5 or 6 weeks, and we've implemented that process. And then the signing of the confidentiality document form, which is also noted in the report, the forensic audit report, has been implemented as well, as far as confidentiality when you serve on an interviewing committee. So it's a process that is now, I firmly believe, of course, we have to enhance it, right, and refine it from the actual applying process to the actual interviewing, right, and the recommendations. But we closely analyze the composition of the committees, the interviewing committees, but that's for district level positions. Now at the campus level, that's different. And I know that we do have to provide some professional learning sessions, or PD, on replicating what we're doing here at the campus level. But for the district level positions, the candidates have been expressing how the process is changing, and they appreciate the fact that we're gosh, it's moving in a different direction as far, they see it as fair. They see it as it's a just system. Also the recommendations, anything that since I came on board as your interim, I've honored the top candidate of the interviewing committee for the district level, right, that I'm bringing forth to you. So I honor and I respect the committee's decision. I do provide a final interview one-on-one with me, just for if it's a campus principal, if it's a director position, it's for the fit, for me to get a feel and an understanding of that employee, and to know that yes, what we're bringing forth to what I am bringing forth to you and the interviewing committee is a top pick, right? So,
Right, so the board doesn't get
we've
involved.
already enhanced the systems, but we still have a lot of work to do in HR.
Dr. Valdez, one of the things that, you hit around, you brought up a good point, is that the largest expenditure that we have here in the district is our staff. And that's how we create that quality product that we have, which is academic excellence in the classroom, is by putting highly qualified individuals in front of our students or working indirectly with them as well. And so what I like with report number 1, the processes that are going to place, yes, they're very effective. I'm very glad, because if you look at the report, you'd see only 2 to 3 individuals doing the hiring or involved in those committees. And it's there. If you go back and look, it's consistent too, as far as the individuals involved when these decisions were being made. And now you have those double digits involved, where you have 9 to 10 people involved, and that increases the validity of the process, because what's very important about reading investigation number 1 is the fact that one of the most critical things we have in our lives was taken away from our employees, and that's opportunity. Everyone looks for an opportunity, no matter where you work or what you do. We always look for that opportunity, or we pray for it, or we hope for it. And in this situation, you're seeing that because of private interest, whether political private interest groups from outside the district or whatever the case may be, you saw that was taken away from individuals. There was individuals going to interviews, and I know, because I know a lot of staff that work in the district, and they were going knowing that they were going for practice. They would say it because they knew they didn't get the call. They already didn't get the notification that they were the ones that were going to be number 1 before the interview process. And that right there, it truly is sad, and it's heartbreaking to read, because no one is allowed to take a God-given right, and that's opportunity. We tell our kids all the time, work hard in school, learn, etc., go to college, then come for your interview, or doors will open for you. And here we had people that were trusted by the community, that were put into positions to oversee and implement policy, and they violated it. And they took people's opportunity away for their own political interests, whether voter harvesting or whatever the case may be. And that was taken away from them. And that's what bothers me the most out of report number 1, because nobody should do that to anyone else. And nobody should get ready one morning and go to an interview knowing that they're not going to get hired, that they're just going for practice. And so I'm glad that this report was done. I'm glad that you're taking proper steps to increase the validity of the hiring process. And that way, everybody here in Weslaco ISD knows that they have a fair opportunity. And that way also our parents know as well too, that we're putting the best highly qualified individuals into place so their child can be successful. So thank you, ma'am, for those.
Thank you. And just recently, with some of the positions that were open, I did tell candidates, you do not meet the qualifications. And we'll stand firm in that conviction of, if you do not meet the qualifications for a position, you will not be granted an interview, and you will not move forward in the process.
Yeah, it's about communication. They want to know, why didn't I get so many calls? Why didn't they interview me? If it was a simple, like we talked about, simply, this is why you didn't have the qualification. Oh, okay. But if you don't tell somebody, well, it's because they know this person, or they know that person, or that's friends over here. And that's how it starts. We just need to work on the communication, definitely. And like Mark said, the accountability. There's no accountability for school board members. Or the kids, they have their STAR test to pass. The teachers have the T-test. The principals have I don't know what it's called, P something. The superintendent has their evaluation given by the board. What about the board members? Who's going to hold us accountable? We have to hold each other accountable. I don't know what we have to do, but am I upset that the other ones aren't here? Yes, I am a little upset, but you know what? Maybe they have things to do. That's fine. It's okay. But attendance has a lot to do with how dedicated you are. If you're going to serve your community, you have to know, you have to not just show up and be given it. I remember one board member before said, when we got onto the board for, that person said, you guys made my job so easy. I just come and sit and approve what you gave me. And my mouth dropped. What do you mean? You have to come in with your research done. You have to plan, be accountable, because all these things that are happening comes back on us. Everything starts here. It's a ripple effect. All the decisions made here are a ripple effect into everywhere else. So we need to be held accountable, definitely, for our decisions.
I'm gonna piggyback.
Go ahead, Coach.
I'm just gonna piggyback on I know what Mark said a little earlier ago, and to me, it is gonna take time to get there. I know it was funny the other day. Somebody told me, "Hey, you guys are being criticized for micromanaging," and I was like, "Okay." Year after year, you see the recommendations by the committees. During the public eye will shortly, hopefully we can put this online here very quickly. We'll see that there was constant manipulation with job descriptions, with board members denying, changing, HR director changing the people. There was a lot of manipulating going on. And for people to say, for individuals to say, hey, well, you guys are doing the same thing now. We're not hiring anybody. And the only recommendations we're making now are for highly qualified people. We're not asking anybody, hey, let's change their job description. Hey, let's take away masters. Hey, let's take away, let's do a teaching certificate preferred instead of mandatory. That's the stuff that was happening. And that's the stuff that's going to take some time to correct, because there is a distrust at all. I'm going to call it what it is. And I'm right here to the people's faces, to our employees' faces. There is a distrust on my behalf. I can't speak for the rest of the board. On my behalf, there is, because of the stuff that we allowed to continue to happen year in and year out. Example after example. Reading this through the first time in June when we got this, or July when we got this, it was just jaw-dropping. I couldn't believe what we were reading. It was rumors. Everybody thought it was rumors, but no, it's true. It's all in this report. And how are we really going to hold each other accountable? We're going to hold our superintendent right now accountable, and she needs to hold everybody else to the highest accountability, because there hasn't been any accountability. There hasn't. And to me, on opposite of what Mark, to me, it's going to take a little bit of time, and we are going to not micromanage, but we're going to dig and make sure that we are getting the best qualified person for those jobs with experience, hopefully. Not just, okay, well, only 3 apply. And we've altered qualifications for jobs. And I still feel that we're still doing it at times. And I know it's going to get better. And it will get better, Doctor, under your direction right now. But it's going to take some time. This is years and years and years of manipulation that's been going on. That's going to take some time to fix. So I don't want to sit here and be blindsided or hey, we're bringing this person to the board or whatever with doubt in my mind. I want to make sure we are hiring the best person. And right now there is a big distrust on my part because of this report right here. So
I just want to say a few words. I'm been on the board since 2017. I've been accused here of micromanaging, breaking policy, not doing my job as a board member. Because I'm part of that, board from 2017. I can tell you if this is what, is called micromanaging, where, the board didn't approve one position in 2019, one position in 2018. I remember those incidents, and I remember there's backstories to those, but I'm not going to get into that right now because it's personnel matters. But just like Mr. Little Santos said earlier, if that's considered micromanagement, we as a current board right now are micromanaging, because we've had probably about 8, 9, 10 positions that have been brought to us, and then we've sent them back. So if you want to call it what it is, call it what it is. But if, I challenge all of us to trust Dr. Valdez, trust our administration. And I know, there's some mistrust out there, but, we're going to take this report, we're going to take this audit and get the recommendations from Mr. Kasner and his team and move forward. Call me naive, call me gullible, call me what you want to call me, but I feel we still have a lot of good people working in this district. A lot of good people that have the best interest, in mind. So I don't want this to tarnish everybody. We have a lot of good employees. Just like we're anywhere, there's room for improvement, and that's what we're going to take this report, and we're going to improve. But to act like the sky is falling and we're a horrible district and Weslaco ISD, is not the right choice, that's wrong. To me, that's wrong. My 3 children graduated from here. I graduated from here, from Weslaco ISD, and I would still vouch for this district. So, I can personally, I can't speak for any other board member in the past. I'm the only one that's here that was part of that. And, it's something that I felt like I had to be here for that. And, I can guarantee you that if we're all on board with this, we're going to, just like what Mr. De Los Santos said, we as a board member, trustee, need to realize what our role is. And our role is to hire the superintendent and let her run the school district. And we need to trust in her and her team. And I vouch and I promise you that that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I've been doing. So that's just my challenge, to all of us, to move forward, and learn from this, make us better, but let's move forward. We're losing sight, let's go, let's get back to it, to the kids, to education, and learn from this report. So I want to thank all of our employees, for all the hard work that you do every day, day in, day out, especially during these times with the pandemic. It's not easy. I know it's not easy, I thank you for all the hard work y'all have done. You have my trust. You have my confidence.
One of the things, and thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, for making that statement. And one of the things I wanted to point out, like I said from the beginning, and I said that in my review of report number 2 and now report number 1, is that our district has always, no matter who sits in that seat or who sits in ours, our district has always had a culture of excellence. If you look at our scores and our performance, we've always led the way. It's only until recently that maybe we started, falling a little bit back, but we've always led the way in innovation and services and academics. If you look at our scores and you compare them even to our biggest competition within our city limits, if you compare population to population, you'll see that we're second to none. We've always been high performing. And that's why I said earlier that I wanted to thank the campus admin and staff and supplemental staff, because even regardless of what's going on with the board, even regardless of what's going on at the district or executive level, they've always been successful and they've always been able to deliver high successful academic products, which is our students being ready for that post-secondary education or the workforce. And so I do commend them and I thank them, because regardless of the fact they've never been faced by this, and our campus administrations too. Yeah, there are instances where maybe there is instances where there was micromanagement and whatnot, or there was involvement, or even at the department decision level process. I saw it firsthand myself. I was in the committees. Can't tell me it's not. It's just too much. And so by removing the board out of the day-to-day operations and letting that be known, we're just going to continue to excel and improve on what we currently have. So Dr. Rodriguez is right. I do thank all of our staff because they've always been highly productive and they've always delivered that product. But now it's our responsibility, though, as board members, to really identify what's really truly there, what's in the report, and also what our staff was saying and stating. Report 1 and 2. There are issues that we need to fix. Coach Armando Cuellar Jr., he can't be here today, but I want to thank him, and I hope he has a quick, strong recovery. But he was also a vital component in this audit happening. And I did want to mention him because I know he's not here today, so I did want to mention that he couldn't be here, and if he could, he would, because he was on the board himself. He can't speak today, he's not here, but he was on the board himself, and he was a strong proponent of this audit. He was one of the votes that probably carried it through and made it possible as well to bring it to the table. And so I want to thank him for that, because I know there was mentioned that some members weren't here, but him in particular, he couldn't be here. And if he could, he probably would. But this report is what it is. And like you said, you're right. We are going to build off on this. We don't have a bad district at all. We're second to none. You know, I wear it on my chest and I don't put it on there lightly just because I'm here. I put it because I believe in it. My kids come to this district as well too. And they've always been highly successful. Okay. And so, and that's what I want to tell to parents too, that are maybe watching this or hear about our forensic audit, that these issues are very simple to fix. And as far as governance as well, as long as we know what our roles are and we stay out of the day-to-day operations, we stop contacting directly campus principals and directors. Nobody should be calling them. Board members should only talk to one person, and Dr. Valdez is right, and that's her. That's it. You have a concern, you call her. The superintendent decides when she's going to take care of the issue and how she's going to take care of the issue, and then she gets back to you. And that's something we need to look forward to as far as putting into policy as well, that administration knows very well not to be dealing outside of the boardroom or outside of Dr. Valdez or whoever ends up being our superintendent out of their management. Because that's a critical factor. I've worked in the school district for 16 years. I've never once got a call from a board member. Never. And I had millions of dollars that I had to manage and many staff that I had to hire, extra duty pay, et cetera, salaries and whatnot. I said, and I never got influenced once. Not once did I have a phone call or did I ever speak to a board member in 16 years. But yet here we do have that issue. And and it's a fact. We know it. Administration knows it and staff knows it. Those are the things we just need to end. The board's not here you're right. The board's not here to manage the district. She is. And all the staff under Dr. Valdez, that's who the taxpayers are paying, and that's who's in charge. And we need just to keep it that way. And once we see that, you're going to see that we're going to be even more productive than we already are. So, I agree with you, sir.
Mr. Kasner, I know this question has been asked, by many, and, can you just give us what the cost of this audit turned out to be? Do you have an idea? Do you have that number?
I think the last invoice I think we've submitted 7 invoices since February. I think and I think we crossed over the 300,000, maybe 325,000, give or take.
Is there any more invoices that are coming our way?
Just the final invoice for September, I guess for September.
Yeah, and those are the things that we knew coming into it, because we spend about 50 to 60,000 on the yearly audit, and this audit went back over 5 years. And like I said, it is costly for a district our size. That's the average expense. We can go back and look at construction projects all day long and look at the prices we paid for that, 379,000 for pavilions or whatever the case may be.
Or T-shirts.
There's a lot of examples.
Awards and
And
T-shirts.
salaries, and we can add up the total. So yes, it was a cost, but it's something that needs to be done, and I think it needs to be done every 6 years. If I were to decide to run again, I would totally push for a forensic audit, and I would love to see what it is. And if it came back like that, you can guarantee that I wouldn't be here in this seat. I would have enough self-respect that I would step down, because the staff knows exactly what's been going on, and so does the community. So regardless, we can say whatever we want to say here, but facts are facts, and that's the truth. There has been micromanagement. We have to accept it. We're never going to build and grow unless we do. And as taxpayers, voters, and parents, we need to be more involved and vet our school board members and see if they're qualified and experienced to sit on the board of $200+ million. Because if not, we'll see another report like this. And because politics is alive and well, and we know that, and it's rampant. But we need to keep it away from our school systems, and we need to keep it out of our classrooms.
I think this is money well spent. And when we can sit there and set aside $500,000 for T-shirts and awards and so forth, we can definitely, and this is an investment because this is going to help us clean up what's broken. So I think there's no price enough to correct what needs to be corrected here. Thank you, Mr. Kessler.
I
Thank you,
definitely
Mr.
agree.
Kessler.
We're definitely gonna, take your recommendations and move forward and make our district better, and that's what this was part of, with this audit. So thank you for all your work. I appreciate, the information you provided.
Yeah, thank you. And, one thing I did want to say is, based on the nature of these types of investigations, we're typically looking at the areas that are the highest concern and where there may be, potential issues. And so certainly, we would love to highlight the areas where the district is excelling. And, that's not really the nature of these types of reviews. So I know they may come off as being one-sided and telling only part of the story, because that's really the way they're designed, is to find areas to improve. Certainly, I always take that into account when, these appear to be, all negative reports, but it is, only part of the picture for an organization.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
And
for
if
all
I
your hard
may,
work.
Vice President Dr. Rodriguez, I'll tell the rest of the story. The rest of the story is that the majority, if not most, Weslaco ISD faculty, staff, administration, whether it's campus level or district level, are exemplary employees. Team WISD and the success of our students, of our boys and girls, academic, athletic, and fine arts and UIL academics would not be where it's at had it not been for an excellent team. It's the action of a few that got us here. And so now we close the chapter. We close that chapter. And as your interim superintendent and as the executive team sitting here in the audience, to all of those watching remotely, those here in the audience, Weslaco ISD pledges to move forward. We face forward. We don't look back. We face forward as Team WISD. And we collectively, as a team, commit to working with transparency and honesty. Our hope is that the publication of the report findings is a step in refining our district systems by enhancing processes and procedures. And that work has already begun. And the public will be able to view the reports on our website. We will also institute and enforce proper internal controls to prevent any future issues as noted in the findings. We're focused on building a brighter future because it's already bright. We just didn't tell that story today. But we will create and build a brighter future for Weslaco ISD in reestablishing the trust and the confidence within those specific district departments referenced in the report, and not only those departments, but we will work with transparency, honesty, and fairness throughout the entire district. That's my expectation. I know that's what everybody expects of me as the interim superintendent, as your leader, but I expect that of every single teammate in Weslaco ISD. Because that's Weslaco ISD. That's the Weslaco way. And I don't expect anything less than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Valdez. So with that, I'll move over to item 6, adjournment.
So move.
Can you announce the date of the publication?
Oh, the date, we will post, Carlos Martinez, we will post the publication tonight. It'll be under the superintendent/board tab on the district website homepage. And then it'll take you there to the forensic audit report button. So it will be on our district website tonight.
Good. All right. Item 6, adjournment.
So move.
8:41.